Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 310 Pantoja versus Asakura. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. Back once again, the dynamic duo. It feels like it's been a month, but that is in fact Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network, over there on the other mic. Keith, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. You don't have it. I think our last show we made fun of Tatiana Suarez not showing up a lot, and we have become the Tatiana Suarez of the Sherdog Network. We in the last October and November, man, we have been slacking, and then we hit the holidays. So yeah, that's great.
And then we hit the holidays. The difference is with Tatiana Suarez, there's the chance that she could have been the greatest of all time. Let's face it, we're all right.
Yeah. So apologize for not doing the card that was overseas super late. I was traveling a lot I covered UFC 309 live in New York City. I was traveling a lot for that, trying to do interviews and stuff. And I was like, dude, there's no way I can dig that deep. I couldn't even fake it. I could have done one of these 20-minute shows where like a lot of people out there fake it. But I appreciate everyone who's filled in for me, doing a better job than I could do.
Yeah, well, it's good to have you back. And I tell you what, man, we're going to talk about this card going down this Saturday in the UFC's de facto pay-per-view home base of the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. But I'm looking at the undercard here. And if I told you there was a fight night card this weekend and the top fight was Movsar Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling, the co-main was Bryan Battle versus Randy Brown, and Cody Durden versus Josh Van was somewhere on the main card.
No.
Cool. That sounds like maybe not the best fight night card of the year, but definitely not the worst. That sounds real solid. That's the undercard. This is a weird card, man. Like, you're slacking on your duty to put these bouts in the right order.
Yeah.
And obviously there's been some noise about that. A certain segment of the fan base kind of
absolutely right
out. Yeah. That Evloev versus Sterling was bumped down to the undercard, while say Landwehr versus Choi, Smith versus Dominick Reyes is on the main card. Tell me your overall thoughts on this card. What kind of grade you'd give it?
Oh, so the Gracie fight isn't on the main card anymore?
It is on the main card. Yeah, Bryce Mitchell versus Con Gracie is on the main card. Oh, no, sorry. Smith versus Reyes is the top prelim.
Okay.
Landwehr versus Choi is the main card opener, and then it's Mitchell versus Gracie. Sorry about that.
Yeah. We'll get to that later. I'm more upset about that one being on the main card, but dude, we just because I know the masses of people was wondering what I had to say. We haven't spoke since last time we spoke. Bo Nickel was 6-0 instead of 7-0 with a decisive victory.
I mean, so some other things happened in the news since the last time we had a show together, but most importantly, Bo Nickel, won. Bo Nickel making middleweight great again.
That's right. Honestly, I don't know if it's because it's been a long time since we've broken down a fight. I'm actually really excited for this one. Like this one is. I was trying to think about this today, and if I asked you name if I asked you, or I did one of these Family Feud, we surveyed 100 people, the top 12 answers on the board, and I said greatest rock and roll bands. You got to say the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin and
Sure.
No one's going to say REM. Rightfully so. I'm not saying they are. Yeah. But pretty much everyone in America knows REM songs.
Oh, yeah.
And they got a bunch of them. And if the lead singer of REM walked down the Providence Place Mall, I don't think many people would recognize, especially because they've been out of the game for a long time. But
yeah,
I don't think many people would recognize him. But if he set up shop and started singing, they would recognize him.
Oh, yeah.
And then you'd be like, and then if I said to people oh, REM, and they'd be like, I think I know one or two of the songs. And they start playing, you're like, oh shit, I know a whole bunch of their songs. Oh, they have a super deep catalog. That's what this card is. This card is crazy deep. It doesn't have a star. It doesn't have a John Jones, Israel Adesanya, somebody that my friends are going to call me about. Yeah, Chris Weidman's on it. Cool. If he had a moment, a decade ago. Dominick Reyes had a moment. Anthony Smith, some of my friends might recognize him. Clay Guida is one of the biggest names on the card.
This whole build-up week is going to be down to whether Ian Gary says anything to make things interesting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But this card is super deep, dude. Like, I love this card. I'm giving it like an A.
I'm with you. And it's a low key A. Like even the quote unquote bad fights on this card aren't too bad. There's the one exception that we'll talk about when we get to it of, Weidman versus Anders getting bumped to this card from UFC 309. But aside from that, there's something to appreciate in just about all these fights.
Yeah. I mean, they have a UFC newcomer headlining, which was interesting. I mean, I wouldn't say that's the end of the world as we know it, but that's pretty cool. That's pretty interesting.
I have some questions about it, but they are not about the appropriateness of him stepping into this level of fight immediately. Talking, of course, about Kai Asakura, longtime Ryzen. I mean, he's a superstar over there.
Yeah. If he wins, there'll be a lot of shiny, happy people celebrating.
Oh,
you didn't get my first reference. You didn't get my first reference.
I missed one.
Yeah,
oh my goodness!
All right, that's it. I'm not gonna do that again. I'm not gonna do it.
I am glad that Kai Asakura did not just choose to stand in the place where he lives, but instead is turned and face west.
Yeah.
Do we have any other dad rock jokes before we rip into these prelims? First up at UFC 310 is a heavyweight matchup between Kennedy Nzechukwu and Lukasz Brzeski. Nzechukwu, the 32-year-old Texan by way of Nigeria, is 13-5 overall. He's 7-5 since joining the UFC out of season 2 of Dana White's Contender Series. He's 1-0 since moving up to heavyweight. He had very mixed results at light heavyweight for the last 6 years or so. Decided this year to move up to heavyweight. He debuted at heavyweight just under 2 months ago at UFC 308 in a weird first round stoppage of Chris Barnett. It was weird, not because he stopped Chris Barnett. He was a massive favorite, but because Barnett appeared to injure himself jumping around like a loon before the fight. He was visibly limping by the time the fight started, and Nzechukwu made the rest of it a formality. Brzeski had been scheduled to face Taliesin Teixeira on this card. Teixeira dropped out a week or two ago. So in steps Nzechukwu on fairly short turnaround, but that will be the luxury for him of no longer being at light heavyweight. As far as Brzeski goes, 32-year-old out of Poland is 9-5-1 with 1 no contest overall. He is 1-4 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of the Contender Series. He won on the Contender Series, tapped out or knocked out Dylan Potter. That was overturned when Brzeski failed his post-fight drug test. He lost the win. He kept the contract. Like I say, anybody considering going on to Dana White's Contender Series, I highly recommend you cheat, because after your suspension is over, you'll still have a job. But at any rate, he has gone on to prove that maybe he doesn't belong in the UFC by going 1-4 since then. He is coming in off a loss. He fought at UFC 304 back in July, where he got knocked out in the first round by Mick Parkin. Odds on this one pretty heavily favor Nzechukwu. He is -600, Brzeski +400. Kennedy Nzechukwu was an enormous, massive favorite over Chris Barnett as well. And I said this about the Barnett fight, and I'm going to say it again here. Nzechukwu is much, much better than Lukasz Brzeski. He's bigger. He's a better athlete. He may even be more well-rounded, but I'm never going to be comfortable taking Kennedy Nzechukwu as that huge favorite over anybody just because he is so vulnerable. I mean, he's been bigger and more athletic than everybody he's faced, and he's barely above 500 in the UFC because he gets caught. He gets caught a lot. He gets caught in fights he was winning. He gets caught in fights where almost nothing was happening. Yeah. So I expect Nzechukwu to win this one. And considering Brzeski's own durability issues, I mean, in 2 of his last 3 fights, Brzeski has gotten knocked out pretty bad by heavyweights that, yeah, they're heavyweights, but they're volume hitter heavyweights. Waldo Cortez Acosta and Mick Parkin are kind of pity pat boxers by the standard of 265-pound guys, and they both lamped Brzeski. Nzechukwu can do that. He should do that. He is more than capable of doing it in the first round like both those guys did, and maybe in nastier fashion, because unlike either of those guys, Nzechukwu might just toss off a head kick and make this thing over in 35 seconds. I'm picking Nzechukwu by first round knockout. But again, if I were a betting man and this were a betting show, I'd say run. Just I'm never going to be comfortable with Nzechukwu out there as that big of a favorite.
Yeah, I didn't expect him to be that big, especially a guy taking the fight on short notice.
Third biggest fight line on the card. It's not even the third biggest line on the card. I can't wait, dude.
I got to figure out which one. I have to look. I can't. Nothing's jumping out to me right now. I'm sure there's something super obvious that I'm not thinking of. I mean, I like Kennedy and Nzechukwu moving up to heavyweight. I think he's going to be much better there. Light heavy. Obviously, that's just me guessing. I'm not influenced by beating up a injured Chris Barnett. Like, that doesn't tell me anything. But what just looking at his frame and everything, he looks like, he's built like Alistair Overeem. So I think moving up should be a good move. He's a solid striker. He can fight with really good output. I expect that output to be even better at heavyweight, being that he's not going to be cutting so much weight. I mean, I go back to like the Carl Robertson where he just beat him with pressure. The issue is his main defense is pillaring, which you don't really want to do, especially with like the big hitters at heavyweight. He also lacks head movement. He backs straight up with his chin in the air, making himself a big target, which right away, I agree with you, don't make him that big of a target, that big of a favorite, I should say. Like, he can pick apart his opponents from range with a jab. He wants to be the one pressuring. He doesn't want to fight off his back foot. When he gets inside, though, he's really good inside too. He's got some serious power. I think his power is going to elevate with him as he moves up in weight. Again, I keep saying as he moves up. I know he's already had a heavyweight fight. I'm just ignoring that fight. Good teep kicks. I love his stepping knees. He uses his strength well in the clinch. Go back to like the Devin Clark fight. He beat him up with dirty boxing. Some good elbows inside. He'll sneak in a takedown, but like, I wouldn't call him a wrestler. He does have a good top game. Mean club, clubbing ground and pound. Going back to the Carl Robertson fight, he beat him up really bad there. That was one of his best showings. Not a submission threat, and he is a bad defensive wrestler, but because of his size, he gets up to his feet very like Derek Lewis style, where he just kind of pushes himself up. He does have good cardio, and I expect it to be better as he moves up to from light heavyweight to heavyweight. Brzeski, he also is a guy who wants to like win with volume as a pressure striker. He tries to fight at a high pace, which is good for a heavyweight, and especially because a guy who lacks power. I'd say his hands are fairly fast. He's got a nice jab. He throws a lot of like looping overhand lefts, a lot of looping punches in general. He's got a big kicking game, likes teep kicks, though his kicks are kind of naked. He's very hittable though, chin high in the air. He lacks head movement. He looks to close the distance and work in the clinch, and he'll look for takedowns. But again, he's not a strong wrestler. He's one of these guys. He's more likely to catch a kick to get the fight to the ground. If he gets him to the ground, he does like to move to a better position. He's got some good ground and pound. His takedown defense isn't good though, and he struggles to get off the bottom. He gassed against Carl Williams. You got to worry about his durability. Waldo Cortez Acosta knocked him out. Mike Parkin just knocked him out. I'm with you. Again, I'm not confident in like negative 600, but I like Nzechukwu everywhere. I think he closes distance, gets inside on Brzeski. I think he lands some shots. He might even get a takedown or two, get on top, club away. I'm going to say Nzechukwu gets a TKO. I'll say second round.
Next up on the UFC 310 prelims, a lightweight clash between Clay Guida and Chase Hooper. Guida, the 42-year-old Chicagoite, is 38-24 overall. He is an even 18-18 since joining the UFC out of Strikeforce approximately 1 million years ago. It's not a million years ago, but it is 18 years ago in January, which is pretty damn impressive. At any rate, 18-18 over 18 years. He is coming into this fight on a 2-fight losing streak and after an entire year off. Unusual for one of the most reliably active lightweights slash featherweights in the UFC over the last decade plus. But last time we saw him was almost exactly a year ago. It was December of 2023, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Joaquim Silva. That was all the way back at the Dariush versus Sarukian fight night card. So Guida back in the cage, looking to get back in the win column. In order to do so, he will have to get past Hooper. 25-year-old Washington State native, 14-3-1 overall, 6-3 since joining the UFC as a veteran of season 2 of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought on the Contender Series, was not immediately signed, but was signed soon thereafter, was still the youngest fighter in the UFC. He's no longer the youngest fighter in the UFC, but he is on a 3-fight win streak. Dating back to early last year, he has wins over Nick Fiore, Jordan Levitt, and Vyacheslav Borshov. The most recent of those fights, the Borshov fight, was back in May at UFC on ESPN, Lewis versus Nascimento. Odds on this one slightly favor the younger man. You can find Hooper out there around minus 1,000. Guida coming back at a comfortable plus 650. Keith?
Oh, Jesus. 1,000?
That's not even the worst. That's a pretty good median.
Not the worst?
He was minus 1,200 on one.
Oh, I know. I thought you were saying like that wasn't the biggest favorite on the card.
No. It is the biggest favorite on the card.
Okay. All right. I was going to say, there's no way someone's bigger than that.
I'm going to flip this one to you first, but talk me down off the ledge, because I'm about to shave my head, climb a clock tower, and, anyway.
Yeah, I get you. That's a good reference. Nice job. Man, I just keep thinking, like, if you were born the day like Clay Guida debuted in the UFC, you'd be looking to colleges right now. That's or voting or joining the military or something.
When Clay Guida debuted in the UFC, Chase Hooper was 7.
Yeah, that's crazy. And now Chase Hooper is a negative 1,000 favorite against Clay Guida. I mean, should we really break down Clay Guida at this point? Does people want me to really rant and long about?
Okay, it's exactly what we told you about Clay Guida last time, just a little bit slower.
Okay, you know what? I'm just do that. Like, seriously, I'm just gonna do that. Like, skip it. Like, do you really want me to rant about he can still wrestle a little bit, but his wrestling was always overrated, and his volume has really declined, and his cardio. I mean, his game was always built on cardio, and his cardio's really declined. So there you go. That's my like. If you really want me to rant, we've broken down many a Clay Guida. I'll stay on Hooper though. He's not a great athlete. Like, that's the thing that's kind of always, been the issue with him. But being that he's only 25, he isn't close to his prime years yet. He can still make big improvements. And I think we've actually started seeing that. He's a southpaw that he tries to use his length to strike from range. He marches forward with really good output. He doesn't have the best hand speed, but he's becoming a lot more technical. He throws straight punches down the pipe. He may be starting to show some power. I mean, he hurt Borshov, who's a known, striker himself. That's his calling card. And I mean, he hurt him last fight. He still has some defensive issues. He doesn't move his head. He's taken a lot of damage for a guy that's only 25. I mean, go back to like Steve Peterson, Steve Garcia, like they really beat him up. His striking is still part of his game that's come secondary to his grappling. He wants to grapple. The problem is he's still a weak wrestler. Though he is relentless to get the fight there, he'll try anything. He'll pull guard. He'll try Imanari rolls. He'll just bull rush an opponent, trying to kind of catch him off guard. If he gets the fight to the ground, he's got good ground and pound, and he's just super slick BJJ grappler. Now the UFC staff would call him like a wizard down there, and I'm not willing to call him a wizard, but dude's freaking good, man. He's got good top game, slick back takes. I mean, even like against like Alex Caceres, who's good grappler himself. He took Caceres' back a bunch of times. He's aggressive with his submissions. He uses those long arms, the legs, the lock of submission. But look at that, like come from behind victory against Peter Barrett, where he got a super slick submission. And that's one like now if they fought, he probably wouldn't have to come back. He'd probably just run right through him.
Right.
He's
like he did Jordan Levitt a couple of years later. Like he wrecked Levitt on the ground.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
No, he's a very funky style grappler, always keeping his hips moving. He can get a submission off his back, and his cardio is really, really impressive. Like, say what you want about him, the kid's tough as hell. Like, you might beat him, but he's going to take shots. He's going to keep moving. He was a guy that and you shouldn't do this and giving up on guys too early. And I kind of did that, and I think really the MMA community did. And he was a guy that even like on the Contender Series, I didn't see the hype on this guy, but he's starting to make me a believer. He's like half the age of Clay Guida. If Guida takes him down, I think Hooper subs him. I think if he stays on the feet, I think Hooper's faster at this. Well, he might not be faster, but I think he can pick him up still like more tactically hit him from distance. I think he rocks Guida a couple times. I think he either buckles Guida or drops him and jumps onto a submission, or Guida like panic wrestles, goes for submission. I think Hooper subs him. Give me Hooper by first round submission.
Yeah, I like the call there, and I like kind of how you drew the path of Hooper's development, because yeah, I think he's the youngest fighter ever to appear on the Contender Series. When he appeared on it, he was, until Raul Rosas Jr. came along, but Hooper was 18. By the time the UFC signed him, I don't even think he was 20 yet. He was the youngest guy in the UFC. And he's another guy that we've seen grow up, for better or for worse, under the lights. And I guess there's one of two ways you can go in that kind of situation. We just had Mickey Gall have his last loss before getting cut from the UFC a few weeks ago. That's one route you can go. And then from a very similar situation, Hooper's at least turned into somebody that definitely belongs. And definitely belonging in maybe the best division in the sport isn't too bad. The kid's not a bust. And as you point out, he's still developing, especially physically. He's going to be stronger and hit harder in a couple of years. Yeah. Weird as it is to say about somebody who's having his 10th UFC fight, he's still kind of a prospect. Here, yeah. And I'm not going to recap any of my scouting of Guida either. I'm with you here. I think this is one of the rare fights where Hooper might be able to determine where the fight takes place. And I think his best route to beating Guida might just be to sprawl and brawl him for 3 rounds. He's way bigger. I think he's more durable at this point, both in terms of cardio and in terms of ability to take punishment. If and when it does go to the ground, I agree. Hooper is so slick on the ground. He's so fast in transition. And while Guida's a sturdy wrestler and obviously can take care of himself as a grappler, he's been caught plenty of times. And he's gotten caught by kind of backpacker, rear naked choke specialists quite a few times. I see Hooper doing the same thing. I could be different from you just to be different, but I see a first round sub as well. Welterweights take the cage next at UFC 310 as Michael Chiesa faces off against Max Griffin. Chiesa, the 36-year-old Washington State native, is 17-7 overall. He's 12-7 since joining the UFC as the lightweight winner of season 15 of The Ultimate Fighter. He won tough at lightweight. He plied his trade at lightweight for several years, but he moved up to welterweight a few years back, and he is 5-3 in his new division. And he is coming off a win. He fought back in August at UFC on ABC, Sandhagen versus Nurmagomedov, where he tapped out the ghost of Tony Ferguson in just a few minutes. That snapped a 3-fight losing streak for him, dating all the way back to early 2021. So he's back in the win column, but definitely still looking to build some momentum back. And he's going to be facing a guy that probably feels kind of the same way in Griffin. 39-year-old Californian, 20-10 overall. He's an even 8-8 in the UFC. He's coming in off a win, but he has been alternating wins and losses in his last 4 or 5 fights. He fought most recently in February at UFC Fight Night, Hermanson versus Pfeiffer, where he took a split decision over Jeremiah Wells. So 2 gentlemen coming off a win, would love to make it 2 in a row. Your favorite is -140, your underdog +110. Who do you think they are, Keith?
I think Chiesa is the favorite.
Actually, Max Griffin is your favorite. Griffin -140, Chiesa +110. Let me know how you see this fight. It's 2 guys in their late 30s, 2 guys who still seem to be in decline, but who's more in decline and who's going to take the L here?
It's funny that Griffin is older than Chiesa, because if you asked me that, I never would have guessed that. Just the way their careers are. I definitely don't view Griffin, Max Griffin is like a up-and-comer or anything like that, but I viewed him more as a guy in his prime. But it's like, no, man, he really is at the end of his career. And Chiesa, the thing about him is I was really worried heading into the Tony Ferguson fight that he was completely shot, but beating like Tony Ferguson at this point in your career doesn't answer anything to me if you're shot or not, it just means you're not Tony Ferguson shot. Yeah. Before that fight, Chiesa looked really bad. And you add in that he's old and he's had tons of injuries and serious injuries. And I know he's talked about back issues and that he's done different things, and now he's completely rejuvenated. I mean, I'm not really believing that. Based on like, you can't take anything from the Ferguson fight. You got to like have to go before that. What have we saw? We saw a southpaw that's very unorthodox in his striking style. Throws a lot of looping punches. He's got good volume, but he really telegraphs his shots. All his striking is just to force his opponents back towards the cage to set up his takedowns. Defensively, he really isn't reacting to strikes well. Go back to like the RDA fight. RDA just trashed his legs, beat him up there. He is a grappler. If he gets close, he will shoot. His entries aren't great, but I always I call people the Michael Chiesa thing, where he has these long arms where you get a leg and be able to find a way to get the fight to the ground. If he gets his arms wrapped, he is very physically strong. He's kind of just presses his opponents down to get the takedown. He uses his size well if they're in the clinch. He loves to grind in the clinch. Again, I'm worried about his age. Like, that's something really taxing on someone's body. Can he still do that? That's such a big part of his game. But if he gets chest to chest, he likes trip takedowns. He's good at winning scrambles. He has a very funky style wrestling game. He has a submission threat. I mean, he's got 11 subs. He's some good guys. Anthony Pettis, Kevin Lee,
Beneil Dariush. Yeah.
Beneil Dariush, Kevin Holland. Did he sub Vicente? He subbed Vicente Luque, right?
Luque subbed him. He went right into him.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh, he got Darst. Yes, he got Darst like 3 times. Like, that's like his Achilles heel. He's this good grappler, but he also gets caught himself. Griffin, like, again, he's 39 years old, which again, I'm surprised he's that old. That doesn't really change how he fights. He still fights with a lot of pressure. He's a fairly well-rounded fighter. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. Though his last fight against Jeremy Wiles, he was gun shy. Though he did get a win. He's a technically sound striker. He's just quick hands. He does everything down the pipe. He was beating up Jeremy Wiles with just throwing straight shots. He's accurate. He works behind a good jab. He's got a nice short, tight right hand. Not a lot of tells in his shots. He fights behind a higher guard. Has some power. I don't think he's like a big knockout artist, but he's got some stinging power. He's an underrated wrestler. Like, he'll sneak in some takedowns, more to like win rounds and win moments. But he's pretty good at winning scrambles, and he's got a good top game. Man, I'm not that high in either. Like, I was never high on Max Griffin. I kind of always viewed him as like a mid card kind of guy. However, I said that Chiesa was the favorite, and I was just kind of guessing what Vegas was. I thought it was going to be kind of trendy and say Chiesa is completely shot. But that's where I'm going. I'm going with Griffin. I say he hurts Chiesa a few times on the feet, and I think he finishes Chiesa. I say he does in the second round. Give me Griffin by TKO second round.
Yeah. I mean, you're right about Chiesa's win over Ferguson, just not teaching us very much, especially because he did it so quick. It'd be one thing if Tony Ferguson had that Tony Ferguson hope-inspiring first round, and Chiesa had to actually show a little durability and stuff. But because Chiesa kind of made it look easy, we still don't know how he looks in the second round, how he's going to react to getting hit hard, what his gas is going to look like if he struggles for the takedown. I completely agree with that. And yeah, looking less shot than maybe the most shot main card fighter we've ever seen in the UFC, in like that version of Tony Ferguson. Yeah, it just doesn't tell us much. It is weird to think that Griffin is 3 years older here. He feels younger, even though he's pushing 40. I mean, he is slowing a bit because he had that little bump where he really performed better. I know he had some out of the cage health issues that he had to address. Like, I think he may have had like some form of diabetes or something, and it just changed his whole training once he got that sorted out. And that's when he strung together a couple of nice wins in a row. He seems to have regressed to the mean here, but it's hard for me to picture Chiesa's paths to victory and him getting them going against Griffin. Griffin fights best off the front foot. He is an instinctive front foot guy. So as you mentioned, Chiesa doing his thing and just walking him into the cage just seems unlikely to happen. Griffin has good, solid takedown defense anyway. Yeah, I think Chiesa's gonna going to kind of get stuck on the feet here, and that's where his defensive issues and lack of durability are going to become real obvious. I'm kind of thinking Chiesa makes it to the second round as well, but I don't think any of this is going to be real pretty for him. Give me Max Griffin by second round TKO after a pretty ugly first round. Flyweights are up next at UFC 310 as Cody Durden faces off against Josh Van. Durden, the 33-year-old Georgia native, is 17-6-1 overall. He's 6-4-1 in the UFC. He's 6-4 at flyweight, and he is coming in off a win. He fought back in September at UFC Fight Night Burns versus Brady, where he tapped out Matt Schnell with a ninja choke seconds into the second round. That snapped a 2-fight losing streak for him against Tagir Ulanbekov and Bruno Silva. Durden will look to make it 2 wins in a row here against Van. 23-year-old Burmese American by way of Houston is 11-2 overall. He is 4-1 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Fury FC flyweight champ. He is also coming in off a win. He took a unanimous decision over Edgar Jairez back in September at Noche UFC. Prior to that, he had gotten knocked out in the third round by Charles Johnson, snapping a long win streak for him. Odds here are pretty close, but Van is your slight to moderate favorite. He's minus 160, Durden plus 130. At age 23, I still like Josh Van a lot as a prospect. He's got a lot of things that you would want. He's got uncoachable athleticism. I mean, he is an explosive flyweight. He's a better wrestler than you would expect from a guy whose highlight reel is mostly like flying knees and crazy 4-second knockouts. Just, good, solid boxer with big power, applies that power to the body, which is always nice to see. He was an obvious standout talent, even as like a 19-year-old fighting around Houston. And his career arc has gone kind of like I expected, but he is running into kind of what happens when some prospects that were blowing through everybody on the regional level kind of step up to a higher level of competition. All of a sudden, guys in the UFC they're not going away the first big shot he lands. He's not getting effortless takedowns whenever he wants them. He ended up taking a loss. He had a good back and forth fight with Charles Johnson and just got clocked in the third round. It exposed some of the defensive issues that he's had and has kind of gotten away with up until now. But if he wants to keep climbing that ladder, there are plenty of flyweights in the UFC that can do to him what Charles Johnson did, including maybe Cody Durden. So I'm interested to see Van's continued development, because at age 23 and already having a loss in his pocket, the pressure's kind of off. There's not that undefeated prospect thing where the UFC almost feels like they have to push him up the ladder regardless of how ready he actually is. This is a really well-made fight for both of these guys, I think. Durden is a real good fighter. He's a guy that, he's like 6-4-1 in the UFC, but that's partly matchmaking. I mean, when you're stepping in up a weight class to fight Chris Gutierrez in your UFC debut and you manage to get a draw,
I did well in that fight. Yeah,
you're going to Disneyland. Like, if you come in up a weight class, take on a future top 10 guy. And since then, I mean, he's gotten blitzed a couple of times by people with a standout skill who've been able to put it on him, and primarily put it on him early. Like, Muhammad Mokaev may just be a better fighter than Cody Durden forever, but Mokaev jumping on him in the first minute of the fight was a very Cody Durden way to lose a fight. Durden is a little bit of a slow starter sometimes in the Donald Cerrone way, where it takes him a minute to just kind of get into the fight, and he's defensively vulnerable and can be hurt and can be caught early in a fight. Luckily for him, Josh Van is not a guy that steps on the gas hard right out of the gate. I'm not sure how much of that is just native caution, concern about his gas tank. I don't know what it is, but I mean, Durden's he's a big flyweight. I mean, I've been around both of these people before. When you look at Josh Van, you're like, that guy's a muscular flyweight. When you look at Cody Durden, you're like, how is that guy a flyweight? It's kind of that thing. It hurts my heart to say it, but I'm kind of feeling the upset here. The people that have beaten Durden, just they have a better handle on their game than Josh Van does. Of course, Van could just catch him with like a crushing punch to the liver or some flying knee to the face and the thing's all over. He could catch him with like Jimmy Flick did, just a 1 in a million kind of moment. But if that doesn't happen, it's hard for me to picture Van winning 2 rounds out of 3 here. Van's first rounds are always going to be kind of dicey. And even though Durden is the bigger guy with the bigger weight cut, I trust him more in the 3rd round than I do Van. I trust Durden to be the kind of guy that will know what he needs to do if he needs to win that round, that'll hit an opportune takedown or keep things on the feet. Give me Durden by decision here in what I guess is a mild to moderate upset, but I think it's going to be a fight where he wins a decision and there are obvious kind of routes to victory for Van that he'll be kicking himself the next day.
I was thinking about when you said if beating Chris Gutierrez in the UFC debut, you automatically have to go to Disney World. What would happen if Nico Price beat Chris Gutierrez in his UFC debut? Like, how much money would it be for Nico Price to bring all his kids to Disney World? Is there enough rides at Disney World to cover all Nico's kids?
Stephen Thompson will have to come around with the bus to pick them all up.
They have instead of the characters coming out and doing a parade, the characters stay outside and Nico and his kids to come down for the parade. It's late. We getting silly. We're getting late. This fight is fantastic, though, dude. Like, so good. I mean, obviously, like, can you say that about every flyweight fight? Yeah, I do. Like, flyweight is fantastic. It's such a great division. It's guaranteed action. Durden is an action fighter. I mean, high volume, constantly pressing forward. He's got fast hands. He's got a nice jab. He's good, pocket boxer. He gets inside. He unloads big shots. He's really good at throwing first, slipping out of the way, and then coming back. So being first and third. I love his counter right hand. He's got, he'll throw this like short, tight right hand, then also throw this like overhand, a little wider, so you kind of really don't know the angle that's coming in. He throws hard. He has serious power. I mean, like, he starts a lot of guys in the UFC so far, and for a flyweight, that's really impressive. He throws hard kicks. He checks leg kicks. He's a good wrestler, and he wrestles a lot. He's relentless to get the fight to the ground. He chain wrestles together. He's got a good top game. He's a good grappler. I've had this in my notes for a while, and you mentioned it. When you backpack Chris Gutierrez for an entire round, like, that's really impressive to me. Busy ground and pound. He's got great head attacks. I mean, he just caught Matt Snell with a super slick ninja choke. For a guy who's a really good wrestler, he doesn't have the best takedown defense, and he also gives up his back to get up, which is a little, concerning. He needs to improve his submission defense. He's been sub 3 times already in the UFC. He did show incredible toughness, though, going back to that deep armbar that Jake Hadley had him in. He's also, for a guy, he hasn't been in the UFC that long. He's got a lot of fights, but he seems like he's one of these guys who's willing to step up all the time. I am a little worried about his chin. I mean, he was knocked out bad by Bruno Silva. He's taken a lot of damage so far in the past. I like his cardio, though. I mean, he's got to go hard all 15 minutes. The thing about Josh Van is, we keep talking about how young Chase Hooper is. Josh Van's younger than Chase Hooper, which is kind of crazy. You talk about his athleticism. He's a very good athlete. You said it's going to be tough for him to win. He makes it even tougher because of how slow a starter is. Like, he's going to be down 1-0 right away. He does it. He's lost every single first round in the UFC so far, which is pretty incredible for a guy who has such a good record in the UFC. He is ultimate builder. By the 3rd round, he's got really good volume. He's constantly taking the ground, forcing his opponent on the back foot, moving forward. He's a good striker, technically sound. He sets up shots well with feints. He's got quick hands, nice snap-on shots. He's accurate. He's got a great jab. He has underrated power himself, and he's not even in those power years yet. He's as good of a body worker as anyone in the UFC. I mean, the body punching he did to Kevin Barros is as good as I've ever seen. He did the same thing to Felipe Bunes, or Boons, obviously his name. He even in a loss against Charles Johnson, he was having so much success early going to the body against Charles Johnson. He's got a good kicking game, good teep kicks. Though he'll throw some occasional naked leg kicks. His step and knees is also one of my favorite things. He's a good wrestler. He's got some fast entries. If he's taken down, he's hard to get down. But even so, go back to like the Zumagula fight. He was popping right back up. If he's on top, he's got good ground pound. He has 2 submission wins. I am a little worried about his chin after getting knocked out by Charles Johnson, but he was hurt by Edgar Cherez in his last fight. So those are 2 fights in a row. That's a little concerning. I love this fight. I mean, I would have no issue if this fight opened up the pay-per-view. It won't, because I mean, this UFC hates flyweight, and they're definitely not gonna put 2 flyweight fights on the main card. But let me ask you this question: is there any chance with Asakura, moving down in weight, that he misses weight? One of these guys gets thrown in to the main event.
It would be up to what Pantoja is willing to accept.
Yeah. But Pantoja probably would. It's Pantoja.
It's Pantoja. Like, he's like, 2 guys that I haven't fought 3 times already.
Yeah,
Like, line them both up.
Yeah, it's probably more likely that he would fight Asakura with one of these ones where he can keep the belt, he can't lose it, and that's always a disaster when that happens. But I think Durden would be the one that would get the title shot if this happened. Just he could talk. That one day he can say some things. I really like both guys. Van is going to have to survive an early onslaught from Durden. Durden is going to bring it. He's going to bring it early. I say Van does, though. It's really gambling, saying, hey, he's going to take the last 2 rounds. I say he does. I say he takes over with jabs, with teep kicks, crushing the body, hurts Durden with the body shots. I say he wins the last 2 rounds. Give me Van by decision.
All right, we have our first disagreement of the card so far. Next up at UFC 310 is a 195-pound catchweight bout between former middleweight champ Chris Weidman and Eryk Anders. We, of course, previewed this fight just a few weeks ago, as it was scheduled to take place at UFC 309 in November. That fight made it all the way past weigh-ins day. Both guys made weight. Anders withdrew with what turned out to be food poisoning or some sort of digestive upset. So it gets pushed 3 or 4 weeks and 10 pounds up. I'm going to stick that preview right in here. Has anything changed for you?
No, I will say this. I saw Weidman talk about not getting paid. That's such a shitty thing with the UFC, where like a fight doesn't happen. Like the guy who doesn't pull out should get paid. I know they said he got, I think he got something, but like it's one of the biggest UFC of the year. You're in New York City. Hook up your guy. He doesn't have many fights left. Like you got freaking Elon Musk sitting in the freaking crowd. Like 2 few people. You can't be like, hey, dude, it's kind of hard to pay Chris Weidman. Like you might toss him like $300K. Like
that'd be like, go back to your Cybertruck and check between the cushions, see if you can find like $150,000 a year. He probably does.
Yeah. Like that'd be like me giving him $1. Or it's probably, I bet mathematicians are probably like, dude, it's not even $1. It'd be like a dime or something. But anyway, that's all I gotta say.
No, I agree. One thing I'll point out is the odds that you hear me mention in this preview. Anders was a slight favorite at the time. It is now a dead pick'em. That is probably public reaction to the fact that it's Anders' illness that forced the rescheduling. But there you have it. So sit tight.
And Weidman being cursed in MSG.
There you go. Weidman, a prophet without honor in his home country. So sit tight, enjoy this ancient footage, and we'll be back in just a minute. Weidman, the 40-year-old New Yorker, is 16-7 overall. He is 12-7 in the UFC. As I mentioned, he is the former middleweight champ, having taken that belt from Anderson Silva 11 years ago. He has been on a rough skid of late, but he is coming in off a win, albeit a controversial one. He fought most recently at UFC on ESPN, Blanchfield versus Fior back in March, where he won a technical decision over Bruno Silva. It went to the judges after Weidman struck Silva with a set of extremely egregious eye pokes, and it ended up, rather than being a disqualification or a no contest or whatever, going to technical decision. Weidman won that technical decision. Silva is still not happy about it, but nonetheless, it goes down as a W for the All-American, and improbably, at age 40, he's going to try to make it 2 in a row against Anders. Anders, 37-year-old Alabama native, is 16-8 with 1 no contest overall. He is 8-8 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He is coming in off a win. He fought in March back at UFC Fight Night, Rosenstrike versus Gaziev, where he took a unanimous decision over Jamie Pickett. So he'll be looking for his second win in a row here as well, and he is ever so slightly favored to get it. Anders is minus 140, Weidman plus 120. We just finished talking about Jim Miller versus Damon Jackson, and the way I feel about this fight is the opposite of that in many ways. Like, I just finished saying that, you know what, if Jim Miller can stick around until UFC 400, as long as he's not just getting knocked out to the point that we're worried about his health, I'm all for it. It's a gift. If Jim Miller wants to keep stretching his lead over the second most prolific lightweight in UFC history, more power to him. I feel the opposite about Chris Weidman. Just win or lose, it has been depressing to watch Chris Weidman for about 5 or 6 years solid here.
Yeah.
And we always knew that when things fell off, they were going to fall off quickly, because even on his way up, where he was as obvious a future champ, or at least future contender, as that division had seen since Anderson Silva came along, he was already frequently injured. And if he did blow out his opponent, he would often, get hit a little bit, get in a little bit of trouble. So it's not surprising that the wheels all fell off the wagon. And ever since he lost the title, and he lost the title almost exactly, we're coming up on 9 years ago, it was the Rockhold fight. Since then, he is 3-7. Win or lose, he hasn't, like, the last time he looked good in a fight was beating Kelvin Gastelum like 7.5 years ago. It's just been rough. Like, if you're a fan of Chris Weidman, I can't imagine this is fun for you. Even if you hate Chris Weidman, and I don't know why you would, but even if you hate Chris Weidman, like, I would think you'd be going, okay, enough, let the guy go. But it's just him. He is that competitive a guy. There's something in Chris Weidman that thinks, my neck feels good. I get past Eryk Anders. How many fights do I need to win to get a title shot? That's what is going on in Chris Weidman's head. The problem is just
Dude,
he's got
dude,
what?
Kamala Harris has a better chance of getting a recount and winning than Weidman has of getting a title.
I agree.
Yeah, I did.
There you go.
I did jab at least one time.
Dude, take your jabs. If we're still doing the show 4 years from now, I'll see you then, I guess. But I'm here to take my medicine. No,
don't worry. There won't be America 4 years from now, right? Right.
All right. So in January, I'll be filming our show from the Capitol building. I'll just be like in a doorway with my laptop, with some dude in a buffalo hat. I'm just kidding. We will not riot.
That's all. Right. That's all. Hey, that's all our listeners. So don't bash or do
that. Here's just describing what Weidman did well during his championship run would be completely irrelevant to what he does now. He was a great offensive wrestler who took to submission grappling like a fish to water. I mean, we're talking about a guy that, entered like the U.S. Abu Dhabi regionals after he'd been doing jiu-jitsu for like a year, and made a final. He's that kind of guy, and was a very good boxer, and just a classic feet planted Rampage Jackson type boxer, where he's sliding on the front foot, just very much a boxer. He barely has any of that anymore. He's slowed up so much. The wrestling has largely gone by the wayside. Again, the Gastelum fight like 7.5 years ago is the last time I remember his offensive wrestling looking good. Just age, neck surgeries, back surgeries, punishment. There's just not much left. And the problem is, in Anders, he's taking on somebody that, Anders might beat him, but Anders isn't going to blow him out of the water in 90 seconds, because that isn't what Eryk Anders does. This matchup almost guarantees us a dreadful and depressing fight. That's the best way I can put it. The scouting report on Eryk Anders is wrong. The UFC is going to talk about him as the former University of Alabama linebacker. He's got a national championship trophy.
Remember by that time we went on this big rant and I never played college football or anything like that. He wasn't a great athlete. We obviously were being sarcastic. And some listener in the comments was like, guys, what are you talking about? He played for the University of Alabama. They were really good. National champions.
And there'll always be one. But even if that wasn't at this point almost 20 years ago, even in his prime, even 10 years ago, and I know I say this every time we get like a former college or pro football player in the UFC, but the things that make you good at the NFL scouting combine don't translate well to mixed martial arts. Like mixed martial arts, hand speed, coordination, vision, how fast you can do the 20-yard shuttle drill just doesn't factor into it.
The 3-cone drill doesn't count.
The 3-cone drill. How many times you can bench press 225 pounds doesn't factor into it.
I would like to see John Jones jump up there and do that, where they hit how high they can jump. I would like to see that, though.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
I'd rather watch that than the Ultimate Fighter show. Just have fighters just see how they can jump.
That would be fun. That'd be more fun than what they actually do. Anders has power. For all the jokes I'm making, if Eryk Anders punched me cleanly, I would die. If he punched most UFC middleweights cleanly, they'd probably go down. The problem is, he is elevated doing almost nothing to a science. Anders is the epitome of an overly patient striker. He's been in some his first fight with Darren Stewart looked like it was going to be kind of fun, and it ended in a no contest, so they rebooked him, and it was terrible. His fight with Lyoto Machida, which was his first headliner, I can't believe they ever let him headline a card again after that, and they may not. No, he headlined at least one more card after that, because he let Lyoto Machida do Machida things. They stared at each other for 5 rounds. Anders can wrestle when he wants to. One thing that his linebacker background adds up to is, at least at one point in his career, he had a pretty good double leg. I don't know why I'm still talking about this fight. It's, you know what? I don't usually pick split decisions, but this is the kind of fight where, on my scorecard, Anders is probably going to win 2 rounds out of 3. Weidman's going to win by split, or it's going to win by split decision, and one of the scorecards will be 30-27 Weidman. It's going to be, neither guy is going to take the other down. It's going to be low output on the feet and even lower accuracy, probably some fouls. It's just going to be an ugly fight. This is your smoke break fight of the evening, in my book, and I'm going to say Weidman wins by split decision, even though my scorecard is going to say that Anders won.
I'm sorry. So you took Anders or Weidman?
I'm taking Weidman to win, but I think it's going to be. I think he's going to win a robbery. He's going to win a Madison Square Garden decision.
All right, because you're like Weidman's gonna win, but then you're like, but my scorecard's gonna see this one. So, I still don't know what your official. I think you. That was some slick like playing the fence. So you're gonna claim the victory now. That was some Jedi move right there.
I am picking Weidman to get his hand raised in the octagon at the end of this.
Oh yeah. Chris Weidman. I mean, I think you said it right. Like you call spade a spade. The dude's washed up. And once someone says like, not that he can't win fights in the UFC. That's what I mean. But that's not what I mean. Like he's crafty enough. He could still win fights in the UFC. I mean, he just did. But more of like, if he really thinks he can win the title, like someone needs to like examine that guy's brain. Like that's man, that's some delusion. I hope I'm wrong. Because I always liked Weidman. I mean, I tend to root for the American wrestlers. That's my background. I coach wrestling 3 days a week. Now it's like it's wrestling season right now, so it's pretty much almost 7 days a week. But dude's 40 years old.
He's 40.
You add in this long list of injuries. Take away the broken leg. He had a bunch of injuries before that and after that. His volume is gone.
He's got a visible scar on the back of his neck from fusion surgery. He looks like someone's about to plug him into the Matrix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His volume is gone. I mean, he's a single striker. He works behind a jab. His hand speed has all but declined. He was never a big hard hitter to begin with, which is why when he knocked out Anderson Silva, it seemed so ridiculous at the time because Dan Anderson, sure, he could clip and knock out Anderson Silva, not Chris Weidman. Like the way Chris and I actually picked Weidman back then, but it was more of the wrestling, take him down, go do what Chael Sonnen did. Like not the way he catch him with a shot like he did in the first round, like how he's winning, getting takedowns. Like no one expected this big shot. He did do well in the pocket against Bruno Silva, to his credit. He was never a big kicker. And then, adding snapping your leg in half, you wouldn't expect him to kick a lot. But surprisingly, he kicked Bruno Silva a bunch. He used to be a great wrestler, a very, one of the wrestlers who really learned the jiu-jitsu game side, where he was a very good top side grappler. But he didn't take Brad Tavares down once. He took Bruno Silva, a weak defensive, down once. I mean, I think his wrestling is gone. He really telegraphed his entries when he was trying to take Bruno Silva down in the fight. Maybe he changes it up, gets a little more body lock takedown, something we've seen old wrestlers do. If he gets the fight down, he's got a good top game. He likes the front headlock kind of series, looks for subs like that. He does have a submission game. Defensively, his chin is what's the big concern. I mean, he's been hurt a lot. He's been knocked out. He's been dropped a bunch of times. He broke his leg. To his credit, I thought his cardio might be shot, and he fights like it is. But his cardio kind of made a little bit of comeback. He wasn't gassed at the end of that fight. I mean, it didn't go all 15 minutes, but it was deep in the fight. Anders, he's a southpaw. I mean, talking about athleticism decline, he's the same bit. He's plodding. He doesn't have the fastest hands. His volume is inconsistent at times. He does attack with combos, but sometimes he won't throw them enough. He'll also throw the same combo a lot. He loves like the jab to the overhand, winging overhand left. He has some pop, but like you said, he's not this hitter that people think he is. Like the broadcast team's going to make him sound like he's prime Mike Tyson out there. He's a very hittable guy. He's taken a lot of damage over the years too. He's been in the UFC a long time himself. The one thing about Anders, I've said this before, he's actually a better wrestler than you think, and he wrestles a lot. If he gets taken down himself, he's hard to hold down. He's just a big, strong guy. He's a pretty solid grappler. He's been doing some grappling competitions, but he was subbed by Andre Muniz. I mean, I used to be such a Chris Weidman fan. I hate picking against Chris Weidman, but I think he should be retired. I mean, he's really fun on that preview show, not the preview show though, the weigh-in show. I think he's got a fun personality. Like use him, make him a booth guy, make him a commentator. Maybe he can like be like take over for Bisbing or something like that. I think Anders is the level of guy Weidman could still win, but this is the absolute peak for him. I mean, you're not even the featured prelim, on a card that you were the face of New York MMA for a while when they were trying to bring, New York MMA to the fold. If you were in the prime, if New York sanctioned MMA a couple years earlier, he would have been headlining the card. I shouldn't say a couple years, 7-8 years later.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody's excited to see Chris Weidman fight anymore. I want to take Chris Weidman. I don't think it's going to go good for him. I think we get a striking match. I think Anders who's not fast, will still be faster. I think he'll hit harder. I think Anders is going to catch his chin, and I think it's good to, even though I just talked about Anders not being a hard striker or anything, this will set up the UFC booth to talk about his power for like his next 5 more fights. I would say Anders knocks him out. Give me Anders by second round TKO.
All right, so fight's going to look like if Alabama and Hofstra played at football.
Next up on the undercard of UFC 310 is a welterweight matchup between Bryan Battle and Randy Brown. Battle, the 30-year-old North Carolina native, is 11-2 with 1 no contest overall. He is 6-0 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC as the middleweight winner of season 29 of The Ultimate Fighter. He did move down to welterweight pretty quickly. He's 4-0 with 1 no contest at welterweight, and he is on a 4-fight unbeaten streak. We saw him most recently at UFC Fight Night Moicano versus Santini in September, where he knocked out Kevin Jusset in the second round. So he's going to look to make it 2 wins in a row, 5 fights since his last loss against Brown. Brown, 34-year-old Jamaican, is 19-5 overall. He's 13-5 in the UFC. He is on a 3-fight win streak. Since getting tapped out quickly by Jack Della Maddalena last February, he has wins over Wellington Turman, Muslim Salikov, and Eliseo Zaleski dos Santos. The most recent of those, the dos Santos fight, was at UFC 302 in June. So Brown looking to make it 4 in a row, Battle looking to make it a 5-fight unbeaten streak. Battle is comfortably favored. He is minus 240, Brown plus 190 as your underdog. I'm definitely gonna give this one to you first, but I was surprised at the line.
Same. Yeah,
I expected it to be closer because I love this fight, man.
So do I. This is one of the. I mean, this card is loaded. I'll say it over and over again. Like I really like this card. Again, my friends are gonna be texting me saying who's gonna win. I'm not gonna get into that. Maybe Ian Michelle Gary will get them talking, but yeah, no. But this card is loaded. This is such a great matchup. This is another one that I would love this one being promoted to the main card. I mean, give me this one and Sterling Evloev on the main card. Over the Mitchell and Gracie and Choi and Landwehr. Even though Choi and Landwehr's that's going to be an action fight, but Randy Brown's good, man. Like that's why I'm surprised he's this big of an underdog. I mean, he's a long and lengthy fighter. He really works well from the outside. He uses footwork to keep his range. He uses feints well to set up his shots. He's got fast hands, nice crisp long jab. He uses his jab to keep his distance. He sets up his power shots with feints well. He also feints with his hips, with his legs. He's got a big kicking game, great teep kicks. It's probably his best weapon. He uses those long legs, to kick his opponent's legs, though his long legs also leave him open to be countered for calf kicks himself. We go back to the Vicente Luque fight where he was beat up with the leg kicks and actually dropped with a leg kick. What I love about Randy Brown's game, and something when you look at his frame, you don't expect this. If his opponent is getting picked apart on the outside and he tries to, crash the pocket, Brown will grab the clinch, and he's going to be on the offense in the clinch before his opponent starts getting work, which I really like. He's strong inside, nice knees inside. He will look for some takedowns. He also has like a very Michael Chiesa, uses long arms to get a takedown. He isn't a too bad of a wrestler. I wouldn't call him a wrestler, but he loves like body lock takedowns. He's got a good top game. He has 4 subs on his record. He does need to improve his takedown defense though, but he's got a good get up game. He's hard to hold down, and he's got a lot of heart. I mean, you saw what Salisky Dos Santos was crushing his jaw with a rear naked choke, and he didn't tap. Move with Bryan Battle. I mean, this guy's looked sensational recently. He's massive for the weight class. He's a very high volume striker, very composed in his boxing. He knows how to save his power by just touch until there's an opening. Though he has been showing a lot of power lately. He marches down his opponents to get into his preferred range. And then once he finds his range, he really starts letting loose. He's got quick hands. He's accurate, nice jab. He attacks with combination. He mixes attacks well, mixes punches and kicks together well. I love his like jab to a high kick combination you don't see a lot. He's got a big kicking game, loves teep kicks. He's got a crushing high kick. He does keep his chin a little too high for my liking, which I don't, is concerning. He rolls with punches well, he rolls with punches, which avoids from getting big shots, but still always worries me with the judges. He is open to the right hand counters because he drops his left hand a little bit and kind of mires his work. He will close the distance, get in a clinch, dirty box. He's a decent grappler, though he doesn't look for takedowns too often. I think if he looked for more wrestling, it would open up his striking, or in vice versa. But in fairness, he did look to wrestle Kevin Juice. He's hard to take down. He's got solid takedown defense. If taken down, he's got a good get-up game, and he's got 5 career subs. So I think this fight is incredible. I really like the winner of this fight moving forward. I think both guys should get a pretty marquee matchup. The winner of this fight should get a marquee matchup. I really like both guys. I think the line is way off. I think it should be much closer. I think Randy Brown's a really good fighter. I think both guys are really good. I think it should be a pick'em. I just love the way Battle's been looking. I'm going to take Battle. I think his volume's going to be too much to match, but I don't have a lot of confidence. Give me Battle by decision.
Yeah, Battle obviously has been a huge surprise because really nobody out of that season of Tough was an unambiguously like spot on prospect. Like there were a couple of interesting guys. There was obviously Battle. There's Trayshawn Gore. There's Andre Petrosky. They were all interesting prospects, but none of them was like, oh, circle that guy right now. He's a future top 10 fighter. No question about it. But here it is. And Battle is a top 10 fighter, and he's a top 10 fighter in a weight class down from the one that he won Tough. I see some broad similarities in some of the things these guys do. They're both huge guys for the weight class, obviously. The reason I lean Battle is just that I think he's a little more defensively sound and a little more durable than Brown. And I think there are going to be moments of serious offense for both guys. I'm sure Brown is going to hit Battle hard on numerous occasions in this fight. And I think the opposite is true as well. I like Battle to respond better to those moments of offense from his opponents. And I think if one guy really just gets caught out cold and clocked, it's more likely to be Brown. I could see it going to decision. I could also see Battle just hitting Brown with something real big at some point in the second half of the fight. I'll go out on a limb a little bit and say we get Battle by 3rd round TKO here, but should be one hell of a fight while it goes. Featherweights are up next at UFC 310 as Movsar Evloev looks to stay undefeated against Aljamain Sterling. Evloev, the 30-year-old Russian, specifically from Ingushetia, 18-0 overall, 8-0 since joining the UFC as the former M1 bantamweight champ. Just so you know, there are 3 former M1 champs on this card. In fact, 2 of them, I think, won their titles on the same night. I think Evloev and Nate Landwehr won their titles on the same night. At any rate, 8-0 since joining the UFC as the outgoing M1 bantamweight champ. He fought most recently at UFC 297 back in January, where he took a unanimous decision over Arnold Allen. Prior to that, you go back to last May for his win over Diego Lopez, which has aged very, very well, to say the least, as Lopez has, I mean, there's a possibility that Evloev wins here and Lopez still like leapfrogs him into a title shot. That's how good Lopez has been. But nonetheless, Evloev is doing exactly what he's supposed to do, which is beating every single person they put in front of him. That quest continues with Sterling. 35-year-old New Yorker is 24-4 overall. He is 16-4 in the UFC. He's 1-0 at featherweight. He had a lengthy and distinguished run at bantamweight that saw him capture and defend the title. He lost the title last August to Sean O'Malley and decided that his best future lay at 145 pounds, also perhaps making way for his longtime teammate and friend, Merab Dvalishvili, to begin his era at 135 pounds. But he made his featherweight debut in April at UFC 300, taking a unanimous decision over Calvin Kattar. This is the next step. And if Sterling wins, obviously former champs always have kind of the rails are greased for them to get into a title shot in another division. But the odds makers and the bettors who drive those lines don't think he's getting it done, as Evloev is a comfortable -250, Sterling +200. What a great fight. If I get my hope and my wish out of this, I have no rooting interest. Both guys seem great. They're both great fighters. All I want is for this to be the funkiest fight in UFC history, which it has a very, very good chance of being. Aljamain Sterling, of course, is the Funk Master. It's an appropriate nickname, but Movsar Evloev, he's a pretty funky dude. One of the very first events you and I ever recapped as a team was UFC on ESPN, Whitaker versus Till way back in 2020. And that was when he beat Mike Grundy. It was like his, I think, second or third UFC fight. And Grundy, Mike Grundy, he was a UK, Commonwealth champion in wrestling. He represented the English national team. Make all the jokes you want about English wrestling, of course, but nonetheless, it means that the guy has wrestled a lot and knows how to take care of himself. He was visibly bigger than Evloev, and I referred to the wrestling in that as Grundy looked like someone trying to give a cat a bath. I have never seen a guy look so frustrated and so defeated after successfully completing like 6 takedowns in a fight, because every time I got Evloev down, he would not concede the takedown. His butt would bounce off the canvas, and his hips were out one way. He's getting an overhook or an underhook, trying to start a scramble. It was madness. And I've been a Movsar Evloev fan ever since. So if and when this goes to the ground, they're going to be about the same size. Sterling was a huge bantamweight moving up. Evloev has always been a small featherweight. They're both great wrestlers, and they're both great wrestlers in the same way. I just want to keep everything moving until I see the perfect moment to sink in a hook and get one arm around your neck. I'm on your back. I win the scramble. Outside of that, for the time that they're stuck on the feet, they're both good strikers. Sterling, his punching has come along, but his kicking has always been his best outlet, and it remains so. He has the fearless kicking game of a guy who does not give a damn if you take him down. He's like, don't threaten me with a good time. Evloev, much more of a boxer on the feet, boxer who can kick, but good volume, not huge power, partly because he's not a huge guy, partly because he seems to throw kind of for volume and accuracy and still looking for his openings to get things to the ground. I think this is just an absolutely dynamite fight. I understand why Evloev is the favorite. I mean, he's undefeated. At this point, he has one of the highest win totals of any undefeated fighter in any major organization, and he's done it kind of quietly because a lot of his fights go to decision because he's a quiet guy. Yeah, but he has a whole hell of a lot of momentum behind him. This should be his crowning moment. It's entirely possible that this is a title eliminator if either guy wins impressively. It's so easy for me to just kind of go with Evloev by decision, saying that all 3 rounds feature a ton of scrambling on the ground, and Evloev just comes out on top or has Sterling in a little bit more peril in 2 out of 3 rounds. I mean, it's not terribly creative, but that's what I'm going with. I think that's how it plays out. He wins 2 rounds out of 3. Sterling looks great in defeat. And it's just one of those fights where one really good fighter has to take a step up, one has to take a step back, or at least laterally. Because unless he gets embarrassed, Sterling isn't going in anywhere at 145. Hell, if these guys have a great fight right now and Evloev is your champ in 18 months, maybe we see this thing again, 2 years down the road. But I'll take Evloev by decision.
I just wonder if there's like an alternative universe where the British wrestling team is like the Cool Runnings movie in other galaxy. It's a bunch of like Americans and Russians tied up their shoes, and also like these British guys come in, eating crumpets and stuff. Oh, shout out to my Brits.
And it's literally like Brad Pickett and Mike Grundy.
Yeah, Brad Pickett. Yeah.
Like Brad Pickett's like 43 years old.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, shout out to my Brits. I love you guys. Dude, this fight is unbelievable. Has the UFC answered why this fight is on the prelims? And you know what? I was just there at UFC 309 and I didn't ask that question. I wish I did, because I mean, is Sterling like on like a last fight of his contract, some kind of thing? Are they just betting this? They must be betting on this is going to be super grapple heavy, and they don't want that. I mean, Sterling's last fight against Chiesa was super boring.
Yeah. I don't, and something I should mention to the listeners as well is all this shakeup took place when Bilal Muhammad fell off the card. About a month ago with like a bone infection in his foot.
Yeah.
But there was no reason to bump Sterling and Evloev that had nothing to do with that fight down like 6 spots on the card. It's just a weird thing. I'll never underestimate the UFC's ability to hold a grudge against Sterling, but there's got to be a better reason than that.
There's got to be something.
If they really think Evloev's going to wash him, then you'd think they'd want that to happen in front of as many eyeballs as possible.
Yeah, I mean, this could be the number 1 contender matchup, especially if Evloev wins.
Yeah, like I said off the top, this would be one of the better fight night main events of the year.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'll say this about Sterling. Sterling is such an intelligent fighter. I mean, despite not being the best athlete compared to the upper echelon guys who've won titles, not generally himself, he just puts himself in the best place to win. He is a better athlete than he gets credit with. So I want to be clear with that. I just mean, like, for guys who win the title, you don't think of great athletes. You don't think Aljamain Sterling. Right. But he's got good footwork. He's pretty elusive. He can fight out of both stances. He constantly bounces his head off the center lines, making himself hard to hit. And he kind of bounces his off head of the center line to kind of get you to overextend and try to land a shot where he can kind of drop down and get some takedowns. He's got good volume. He does best when he's working from range. He's very unorthodox style of boxing where he kind of lands from different angles. He will overthrow his shot sometimes, leaving open to be countered. I mean, the perfect example of that is obviously the Sean O'Malley fight. He throws to kind of just get reactions. So he tends to just touch and time, then he'll throw some big shot to get you to react, and then that's when he's coming underneath. He lacks punching power. I do think it improves moving up a division. I mean, he always talked about him being a big bantamweight. He talked about how much weight he's cut. I think he should have a little more power moving up. He's got a big kicking game. He loves teep kicks. I mean, I go back to like the Pedro Munoz fight. He crushed him with a body kick. He's got a nice switch high kick himself. The way he dips so much, it looks like he's going for a takedown, and that's when he lands shots. His wrestling threat really opens up his striking. He's a really good wrestler. He's more like an opportunistic wrestler. He isn't explosive, but he has this like innate ability to time his entries. I've said it before. It reminds me of George St. Pierre, and like, a weaker version of that. But like, that's what St. Pierre was. He wasn't this great, like, get to hips and drive through. He just was time. He had great timing. Sterling will dive in sometimes without a setup. He'll use those long arms to kind of close the distance, similar to Michael Chiesa. He's relentless too. Like, he's relentless to get the fight to the ground. He uses his long legs so well to wrap up limbs. He's got great top control. He'll work it, inch by inch at a time. He'll lock in, he locks in a backpack, and he rides, and he's as good as anybody. He's got an incredible back game. go back to like the Henry Cejudo fight, like where he's taking down Henry Cejudo, like that obviously he's not Olympic gold medalist Henry Cejudo in his prime, but that's still a pretty solid notch on your belt. And he put Cejudo not just takedowns, he put him in some compromised situations. He's a great submission artist. I mean, he hit that amazing solo stretch back in the day. He's got cardio and the experience to go, deep into fights. He has been hurt in the past. I mean, Pedro Munoz hurt him to the body. Sean O'Malley blasted him. He's got good cardio though. Like he can go hard the whole time. Evloev, I mean, this guy's so fun. Like you talk about his grappling, but he's well rounded. He's got good volume on the feet. He's technical. He's got some quick hands, good snap on his shots. He works behind a quick jab. He follows up with short, tight shots. He's got the slip and rip counter game. He's good, just kind of slipping just out of range and then countering and staying in range to counter some good shots. He does well to kind of keep himself in the range to land the power shots. He's got a good kicking game. He'll throw like a high kick in a combination, which is pretty rare. He does some stupid spinning attacks, but he'll even throw like some spinning attacks, just kind of get a flurry coming, and then that's when he's wrestling. I mean, his wrestling's off the charts. Fast entries. I love his like reactionary double when he's pressured. He will shoot a little too far away without some setup sometimes, but he shoots. He's really good. Also, like Sterling, like good timing, but he shoots when his opponent starts to open up with strikes. We saw that in the Arnold Allen match a lot. He's great at winning scrambles. He isn't that big, so he does have a hard time keeping his opponent down. But his mat return game in his last fight was awesome. He isn't a submission threat. His defensive wrestling, you talk about, the Gurney fight that he was taken down. Lenz took him down. Barzola took him down. But he has this incredible ability to get right back up. And then he has this awesome ability. Like, he wasn't tapping against Diego Lopez. Lopez had him in some serious situations in their fight, in some serious submission attempts. This fight is great, man. I mean, it is. I mean, if I was picking my top 3 fights, this would be in it, and be like this one. I don't know, Randy Brown fight. I mean, that's actually. I mean, that's probably. I have to make it to 4 because I like the Durden Van fight, and then obviously I like the Carman event. I've dipped back and forth. Evloev is more well-rounded. His wrestling is truly amazing, but Sterling is such a great like grappler himself. He puts himself in positions to win. I'm shocked by the line. Like I thought this should be a pick 'em. Like they could go either way. I'm gonna go with the upset. I'm gonna say Sterling finds a way to out-grapple Evloev. That he's so smart. Give me Sterling to win a really close decision.
I mean, again, I said I have no rooting interest in this other than I want to see some scrambles.
Yeah, me too.
But my goodness, if Sterling wins, especially if he wins by out-grappling Evloev, we're gonna have some interesting conversations on the recap about what that means. And I have the feeling that the post-fight presser is going to be pretty live with like Topuria chiming in through Twitter with some things to say. So now I'm almost rooting for that to happen. Well, I mean, Topuria's going to have something rude to say about either guy if he wins, but yeah. Second from top of the UFC 310 prelims is a welterweight matchup between Vicente Luque and Themba Gorimbo. Luque, the 33-year-old Brazilian by way of Florida, is 22-10-1 overall. He is 15-6 since joining the UFC out of season 21 of The Ultimate Fighter. He had a lengthy, impressive run as both one of the welterweight division's most reliable action stars and a borderline top 10 fighter, but things have come crashing down over the last couple of years as he has lost 3 of his last 4, including his most recent outing where he got knocked out in the second round by Joaquin Buckley. That was back in March at UFC on ESPN, Blanchfield versus Fior. So Luque definitely looking to turn things around, or maybe just looking to have a few more fun fights, a few more possible bonus checks before swinging into the sunset. He had been scheduled to take on Nick Diaz, which seemed like at least a kind of an intriguing matchup for both guys. Something wild might happen. Diaz withdrew from the card, and in steps Themba Gorimbo.
Could you imagine?
Man. 33-year-old Zimbabwean, but also by way of Florida, is 14-4 overall. He is 4-1 since joining the UFC early last year. He stepped in last February, got guillotined by AJ Fletcher in the second round. Since then, he has won 4 straight over Takashi Sato, Pete Rodriguez, Ramiz Brahimaj, and Nico Price. The last 3 of those fights all took place this year. The Price fight, the most recent of those, was back in October. So Gorimbo comes in off the shelf with the possibility of winning his 4th fight in 2024, and he is moderately favored to do so. He's minus 150, Luque plus 130. Man, poor Vicente Luque. I'm not sure if definitive odds were out when Nick Diaz dropped off, but I assume that Luque was a very comfortable favorite over him, even with all the knuckleheads that have no idea what Nick Diaz fights like in the 2020s.
Sure.
Diaz drops out, and in steps Themba Gorimbo on a 4-fight winning streak, looking kind of like a killer. Rough stuff, and Gorimbo's nickname is the answer. I don't know if he's the answer to welterweight or the answer to anything like division wide, but he has looked fantastic since that short notice first loss last February. And it's kind of a deceptive thing. And whenever I hear a MMA fighter introduced as a judo fighter, or when they talk a lot about their judo background in promo reels or whatever, I always prepare for a guy that's never, ever, ever going to try to take the fight to the ground and is mostly just like a haymaker specialist. That's just kind of what it feels like.
In fairness, if you haven't got your black belt from the Kentucky Judo Federation, does it even count?
Yeah. Yeah. Dontel May's out there handing out like black belts. But Gorimbo really does have it. You can tell when he's in the clinch. You can tell by how he gets takedowns or fights takedowns from the clinch. And on top of that, oh, by the way, yeah, he does throw a mean haymaker. His striking game feels kind of awkward and herky-jerky to me, but the individual techniques are all fast and have a ton of power. It looks weird when he strikes in combination. But thus far, at least against the level of people he's been fighting, nobody's really been able to make him pay for it. And it's all kind of a moot point anyway, because almost any real live body I'm going to favor over Vicente Luque right now. These guys are both within a couple months of each other's age, but Luque is about 15 years older in fight years. He is an old 33. He's a guy that, I mean, he started fighting in little shows in Brazil when he was like 16 or 17. When he graduated from the Ultimate Fighter, his career record was like 7-6-1. He was barely over 500. He had lost fights in nowhere Brazil. Like, he has taken untold amounts of punishment and been doing this for like literally half his life, almost on a professional level. He just feels like an old 33. And granted, 2024 is going to go down as the year of fighters that we thought were shot or old or over the hill suddenly finding new life in the post-USADA era. But I don't see that in the case of Luque, because the guys that are having those kind of comebacks are the guys that were slowing down or their gas tank was gone. Luque can't take punishment anymore, and his fight style always required him to take a ton of punishment. There's no pill or IV for that, and that's why, rare for either Keith or me to say, I'd be comfortable with this having a wider line. I think Gorimbo is going to knock Luque out, because here's the thing. There's 2 possible Luques we get in the cage. There's Fun Times 2017 Luque, who just wants to get into a slugfest. He's happy to take your back and tap you out if you take him down, but mostly he just wants to slug it out. That guy gets flatlined by Gorimbo in the first round. If we get strategic Luque that uses his not just BJJ but lucha libre background, his sometimes underrated reactive offensive wrestling, and just takes the safe route and tries to get the fight to the ground, knows he's an underrated grappler, that would make things more interesting. But I don't think he's going to be able to take Gorimbo down on any kind of consistent basis, even if he wants to, even if he tries to. So yeah, I mean, I kind of listed the things I like and don't like so much about Gorimbo, but a lot of it doesn't matter because even if Gorimbo isn't as good as I think he is, I think he's gotten enough to get past Luque at this point, and it's just a matter of how ugly it is. I'm going to take Gorimbo to win a lopsided and ugly decision where Luque is probably spared from a TKO just by his toughness. Like the ref tells him to move and he moves. And that's how, you know, he makes it to the end of one of these rounds. But yeah, give me Gorimbo by kind of a beating here.
What did you say the line was?
Gorimbo's -150, Luque plus 130.
Yeah. Imagine going from fighting Nick Diaz, huge. Yeah, you got to be in the pay-per-view. It's a huge name.
You were probably going to be -400.
Oh, I think he was been like -1,000.
He might have been.
Maybe.
Been.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I know Vegas is not necessarily your odds of winning, but more of how their odds of getting the most money to bet. You know, probably get people to bet on Diaz, but then end up going against like Gorimbo, who do you know? When you look at Vicente Luque's career, he's gonna face possibly the biggest name he's ever faced with the least threat to now go against the one of the least names he's ever faced. You know, in recent, I'm not talking when he first came to UFC, but like since he's been a top of the card kind of guy, and one of the bigger threats, or not one of the bigger threats, but you get my point. Like someone that he's an underdog to. It'd be like
Luque, real quick, Luque was -650 against Diaz before they pulled it.
Vegas, okay. Yeah, all right. That makes about sense. So really that's like an 800 swing. $800 swing.
Yeah.
It'd be like you're a big rocker. You know, you I'm not gonna do another REM reference, but you're a big rocker, and you're like, hey Ben, you're my partner. I spent my life savings. I'm gonna let you gotta meet a Beatle. And you'd be like, holy shit, I'm gonna meet Paul McCartney. And then all of a sudden, like, no, sorry, Paul can make it. You're like, all right, I guess it'd be cool to meet Ringo Starr. And you'd be like, no, you got Pete Best. like that's what's happening.
And add in, and by the way, Pete Best is gonna like punch you in the nose.
Pete Best is just gonna punch you in the nose.
Like 81 or however old he is, Pete Best is gonna pop me in the nose. Yeah.
I mean, he probably hits harder than freaking Horan Gracie there. What's his name? I can't think of his name. He's what's Gracie's name?
Kron
Gracie. I called him his dad's name. Hold on.
Yeah. No, his dad's Hickson, but yeah.
Hickson. I'm sorry. Yeah, he's Hickson's son. I'm sorry. Yeah, his dad, Horan's his uncle. Yeah. Sorry, I'm mixing up my Gracies. Sorry. This fight. Let's just Vicente Luque. I mean, how do you not love Vicente Luque? Like he's one of the most likable guys in the history of the sport. It comes down to what does he have left? I don't know, man. Like he has not looked very good lately. You know, when he was at the peak of his game, I mean, he was the ultimate action guy. He would constantly be moving forward, not care if he's getting hit, attacking back with hard shots, and really good volume. He was always a little flat-footed, but he was a good boxer with a high guard defense, threw a nice jab, crisp, tight power shots following up, good combinations, straight shots down the pipe. When he got to the pocket, that's when he started unloading those like violent power shots. He's always been hittable. He kind of like shoulder rolls to deflect them. He's taken God knows how much damage. I mean, insane toughness. You go back to the fights like with Stephen Thompson was teeing off on him. Jeff Neal was teeing off on him. It was always like, how could this guy take the punishment and still be such a great fighter? I'm wondering if that damage is finally caught up to him because he's looked really bad lately. No, he's got a good kicking game. The problem is his overall speed has really dipped. I mean, you go back to this fight against Joaquin Buckley, he really struggled with the speed of Buckley. He is a good grappler. I mean, he turned RDA into a takedown machine. But his defensive wrestling, I mean, Bilal Muhammad was like, oh my God, man, take him down over and over again. But again, Bilal Muhammad's the man. But against Buckley, I mean, the guy tried pulling guard, which was really weird for for Luque, a guy that usually didn't care about getting hit. Like you could see like he understands where his durability is. And if he gets the fight to the ground, he's got 6 subs. He loves Darce chokes. He is hard to sub himself. And he's got a lot of experience and toughness that he can make a fight hard against anybody. Gorimbo, even he's up and coming fighter. He's long and lengthy. He's a good striker. Despite having a long reach, he doesn't mind sliding inside and being in a brawl. He kind of throws some punches from wide angles. He's got fast hands. He's got a big kicking game. He likes, you mentioned it, he likes to close the distance, get in clinch, chest to chest, grind, get some takedowns and some trip takedowns. He's a good outside wrestler, though. He's like a strong wrestling, though he'll sometimes dive into his opponent's legs from a little too far away for my liking. But he gets the fight to the ground. He's got a good top game. He will like there's a tough line between controlling and stalling. Like he has no problem stalling, but when he lets his hands go, he's got some good ground and pound. He's got 6 subs on his record. These fights are always hard to pick because a prime Luque, I'd feel very confident, at this point of their career. You really have to guess where Luque is at this point. Has he declined the part? Like, has the escalators passed? Like, has he gone down that far? Because this is a huge step down in competition from your Joaquin Buckley's, who's 1 or 2 wins away from getting a title shot. So you're kind of guessing, is he shot? I want to be wrong. I don't know if I want to be wrong. If Luque would lose bad and then retire, then I'd be okay with him being shot. What I don't want to see is Luque has given us enough excitement for freaking a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to see Luque get beat up. I think it's going to happen, though. Like, I think he is shot. I think Gorimbo beats him up from distance. I think he's going to be too fast for Luque. I think Luque's going to try to grapple. I think Gorimbo is good enough that area to I know you like his grappling. I like Gorimbo's grappling too, but I think it's the advantage going to be on the feet. Give me Gorimbo to beat up Luque. Luque's so tough. I don't think he gets stopped. Like, give me Gorimbo by decision.
Next up at UFC 310, and at least as the card is constituted as of the beginning of fight week, the top prelim is a light heavyweight matchup between former title challengers Anthony Smith and Dominick Reyes. Smith, the 36-year-old Nebraskan, is 38-20 overall. He is 13-10 across 2 different stints in the UFC. He is 9-7 since moving up to light heavyweight a few years back. A run that saw him be successful enough to challenge for the title back in 2019. He came up very much short against John Jones, but since then he has continued to hover around the rankings and send more than one up-and-coming prospect packing. He is coming in off a loss. He fought at UFC 303 back in June, dropped a unanimous decision to Roman Dolidze, so he'll be looking to bounce back from that, and he will need to get past Reyes in order to do so. Reyes, a 34-year-old Southern California native, is 13-4 overall. He is 7-4 in the UFC. He also is a former light heavyweight title challenger. He challenged John Jones at UFC 247 back in February of 2020, took the GOAT to the wire, and actually won the fight in the eyes of at least a few observers. That was a high watermark, but that began a slide of 4 straight losses for Reyes, during which he looked increasingly inert. Some of us may have wondered if he was done with the sport for good, especially when he took all of 2023 off. But he came back this June and knocked out Dustin Jacoby in 2 minutes, announcing that he's back in some form or another. If he gets another win here against a fellow former title contender like Smith, I suppose the sky's the limit. Odds on this one, somewhat surprising, at least to me. Reyes is minus 330, Smith plus 240.
That's nuts.
I could not agree more. Here's the thing. I think both guys are on the, I mean, it's not controversial to say both these guys are on the backside of their career, but I feel as though I know where Smith is at. Like, he's not entirely shot, but he's definitely down there. He's, you know, at this point where they used to be able to throw your, you know, Devin Clark, Jim Crute type at him, Brian Spann, and he could show him, nope, these guys aren't ready for prime time yet. Now people like Roman Dolidze are getting past him. Khalil Roundtree knocked him out. I think Smith is probably, you know, about the 15th best light heavyweight in the UFC right now, and a guy capable of kind of jumping up and surprising somebody ranked higher than him on the right night. He is another guy, and we just finished saying this about Vicente Luque. He's another guy who has had so many fights. Also, like Clay Guida, though I didn't really focus on that, but he's got sort of the same thing as Clay Guida, where he was a regional Midwestern fighter in the early aughts. So when you see that Anthony Smith has 58 pro fights, know that it's probably closer to 70, and there are fights in some barn in Iowa or Nebraska where, you know, Smith fought and just the records never came to us. It happens. I mean, Clay Guida's second or third fight, he was literally fighting in jean shorts because he put down his beer and came out of the crowd and fought some dude because, you know, some guy dropped out. Anyway, Smith has an ungodly amount of wear on him, and because his style is one that kind of requires him to take a lot of punishment, it's starting to show. He just can't do what he used to do. Once he moved up to middleweight in the UFC, and certainly once he moved up to light heavyweight, for a guy that doesn't have huge one-shot power, he became kind of a finishing machine, and he became a death by 1,000 cuts guy. Like, it was more finishing instinct and attitude than anything else. Like, some people are just finishers by instinct. And when you look at Anthony Smith, when he got people like, he would just crowd people like Rashad Evans or Shogun Rua into the cage and just launch this just vicious assault of elbows and knees and uppercuts until the guy just wilted. He still wants to do that. He'll try to unleash it from time to time, but he's having tougher time getting guys into that position. He's having a tougher time uncorking the long combos he used to in those situations, and he's having a much tougher time dealing with whatever they're throwing back at him. Just, he doesn't react to getting hit the way he used to. So that's Anthony Smith. He can still beat a solid guy, but he can't take punishment like he used to, and he can be taken down and controlled in a way that he didn't used to be. But for Reyes to be a greater than 3-1 favorite against him, that must mean that you believe that the 2 minutes of work he put in against Jacoby are a sign that everything we saw a couple years ago is not an issue. Because the thing is, Reyes lost 4 fights in a row, starting with the Jones fight against, you know, Jones in the title fight, Jan Blachowicz and Yuri Prochazka, both of whom were future champs and, you know, on their way up from the top 10 into the top 5. And then Ryan Spann, who was, you know, a borderline top 10 guy at the time and on his way up. Like, they weren't bad fighters he was losing to, but the way he was losing, just, he looked so much worse from fight to fight. He was getting slower. He was getting less durable. He, at his best, going into the Jones fight, like, he had a little bit of Jones to him, where he was so big and athletic and powerful for the division that he was doing things to people that just were kind of uncommon to see, and that all kind of went away. He's still a huge guy, but the speed and just kind of the smooth, fluid athleticism just seem to have been gone. And coming back and just crushing Jacoby in like 2 minutes, it's a great, I mean, it was a great moment for him. Like, he obviously was like super emotional. Like, I'm happy for him that he had that moment, but it's not enough evidence for me to think that he's turned it around from the guy he was in 2022 or the guy that he wasn't in 2023. If that is the case and he is back, he is the 2018, 2019 version of Dominick Reyes, he's going to destroy Anthony Smith. I just don't think he is. And as much damage as Smith has done and as much as his durability has waned, if Reyes isn't back, then Smith might actually still be the more durable guy in the cage. I'm feeling the upset here. I don't believe in the return of Dominick Reyes. And before the Jacoby fight, like if he was fighting Smith back in June instead of Jacoby, I would have been just like hammering the button on Smith as maybe just one of the worst possible comeback opponents for Reyes. I still kind of feel that way. And if Reyes loses, and he's like I think he is, it's not going to be a decision. Give me Smith to maybe walk through some fire, catch Reyes, turn it on, and where Smith was able to recover, Reyes won't be able to. Give me Smith by second round TKO.
Yeah, and the whole like Dustin Jacoby situation, like it was a wild fight. He was getting tagged up too. Like it wasn't like he just like put out like an Anderson Silva, Chris Lehman type situation. Yeah. Dude, you talk about Anthony Smith, and you know, you think about the run he had. He's fought. I mean, he's been fighting forever. He's fought everybody. I mean, like you know, some of the biggest memories I always have of him is obviously the not taking the freebie win against John Jones to become the champion. But I always remember that Hector Lombard moment where he was one of the most baddest thing, where he was yelling across the cage to Hector Lombard, who looks like a freaking Greek god, and he's like Hector Lombard highlights is as scary as anybody who's ever fought. And just seeing this guy like mentally wilt and him screaming across the cage like, "Know my name now" and all that shit. Like, dude, Anthony Smith, like, say what you want of him, that guy is a fighter. Like, he doesn't look it. You think of like when people say, "Oh, oh God, give me who represents MMA?" Like Anthony Smith is not the guy you're going to think of right away. But if someone said Anthony Smith, I'd be like, dude, that's a fucking good choice. Like, I like it. I mean, I've always been an Anthony Smith fan. It comes down to I am not believing in Dominick Reyes. Like, I'm not, it comes down as Anthony Smith's shot. Now, Anthony Smith he was never a great athlete in his prime. It just looked like he's completely lost everything. He has to be extremely technical, and obviously you'll never question how tough he is. I mean, when the fight with his teeth were falling out and shit.
Oh, yeah, Glover Teixeira. Yeah.
This guy, oh my God, like he's he when he's at his best, he's a pressure striker that marches down his foe. But at this age, it is a much slower pace, controlled pace, which really doesn't favor him. I mean, his output is really sinking. When he attacks, he's attacking combination, but now he's fighting kind of in like spurts. He still has some pretty tight boxing, but his hand speed is really slowed. He's got a good variety of strikes, but he was never a big power puncher. He's more of a point fighter. He has a good kicking game. He likes to end combination with kicks. He's got a good kick, calf kicking game. He's got some good teep kicks. That's a big part of his game, but he has so many defensive holes. His head movement is slowed. He's very hittable. He's taken ungodly amount of damage. Rakic, was crushing his leg with kicks. Delici beat up his leg with kicks. He will wrestle a lot, but he's definitely more of like a BJJ practitioner than a traditional wrestler. He is submission threat if he gets it down. He's got 16 subs. I mean, he did recently catch Victor Petrino in a guillotine, and I could totally see him doing something like that. I mean, I just really don't trust his chin anymore. I mean, he's taking so much damage. I mean, even his cardio, like he fought against Roman Dolidze. I mean, he gassed out earlier. That was not a high pace fight.
No.
Reyes, so like everything I say about not having any confidence in Anthony Smith, like how would I have confidence in Reyes? At his best, I mean, he's southpaw. He's a complete, like everything I said about Anthony Smith. Think of the opposite of Reyes. Like he's always was this great athlete, super athletic, super quick, explosive. He springs at his opponents. He moves well. He counter strikes. He's got a good variety in his attacks. But this is all when he's on his top of his game. Like he always had this great, fantastic straight left that was hurting John Jones. He uses movements well to counter strikes. He can land while backing up. Like I gotta go. I'll say, oh, look at his fight against Chris Weidman, where he was catching Chris Weidman coming in, and that's my point. Like if I want to say nice things about Dominick Reyes, I gotta go back to Chris Weidman fight. 5 fucking years ago. When remember, Chris Weidman was in like the title picture at light heavyweight. They were talking about like Chris Weidman wins 1 or 2 fights, he could be fighting for the title. You know, they were doing remember the backstory of Weidman and John Jones wrestling history and all this stuff.
I remember.
That's what we're talking about. So like Dominick Reyes being a huge favorite, like why? You know, it is. I mean, still like his step back left counter is the best thing. I mean, it's what he caught OSP with. You know, he showed against Dustin Kobe, you know, good striker. He still has some power, and he in his recent losses, he tends to overthrow his strikes. Against Span, he was loading up way too much. He was surprisingly very hittable in a stationary target. Jan Blachowicz and Yuri Prohaska just absolutely teed off on him. And his chin looks gone. I mean, Ryan Span knocked him out with a jab. Because he likes to strike at his opponents, you know, he will get pressured back. Yeah, I should say he's trying to counter his opponents. He's stepping back. Opponent who steps in on him kind of really counter him back. I actually think he's a decent wrestler. Like he should clinch and wrestle more. Like he clinched against John Jones and held his own there. You know, when I say wrestles, I mean like grind, not like shooting takedowns. Like I think he's got like 2 takedowns in his whole UFC career. But he did show decent takedown defense against John Jones, against Chris Weidman. He uses height well with those like Travis Brown downward elbows. If taken down, he can spring back up to his feet well. Again, against Chris Weidman, against Jeremy Kimball, like that's fucking how far back I gotta go. Right? Like I'm trying to like sprinkle like fairy dust on on like a piece of shit. Like I hold on, let me. I'm not calling Dominick Reyes a piece of shit. I'm saying like I don't know. It's like I'm saying like I'm trying to like fancy up. I'm putting an air freshener in a freaking Pinto. Like, yeah, you know, when it's like, if you see like someone has like a piece of shit car, but they buy like they go to AutoZone and they get one of those like covers for the steering wheel. Like,
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Or just the shitty car and they get like an aftermarket spoiler on it that's like a different color, or like really nice rims that cost more than the car.
That's every car in my city, but yeah, it just I'm not calling Dominick Reyes a piece of I shouldn't have used that. I was not calling him a piece of shit. Like as far as I know, he's a decent human being.
Yeah.
I wouldn't feel confident to have Reyes this big a favorite over anybody. I do think Smith is shot. I want to take Smith in an upset. The deeper the fight goes, the more I start to favor Smith, even though I just talked about him slowing down and his cardio fading, and it just I don't know. I'm gonna take Reyes. I don't know why. I think this fight's gonna be ugly. I still think Reyes might be too fast for him. I think Smith will survive, but it's gonna get sloppy. It's gonna get tiring, and I don't know. Give me Reyes by decision. I have 0 confidence in my pick.
The 5-fight pay-per-view main card of UFC 310 begins with a featherweight matchup between Nate the Train Landwehr and Duho, the Korean Superboy, Choi. Landwehr, 36-year-old Tennessee native, now training in Florida, 18-5 overall, 5-3 since joining the UFC as the outgoing M1 Global Featherweight champ. He is coming in off a win. He knocked out Jamal Emmers late in the first round at UFC on ESPN, Blanchfield versus Fior back in March. That allowed him to get back on track after his decision loss to Dan Ige last June. So he'll look to make it 2 in a row here against Choi. Choi, 33-year-old South Korean, 15-4-1 overall. He is 4-3-1 in the UFC. Notably, he is 1-1. Oh, sorry. Notably, he is 1-0-1 since returning from Korean compulsory military service early last year. He returned after a 4-year layoff with a majority draw against Kyle Nelson. Then he came back this July and pounded Bill Algeo into tapping the strikes in the second round at UFC on ESPN, Lemos versus Janjiroba. So Choi showing that considering he left the UFC on a 3-fight losing streak, then was in the military for 4 years, has surprisingly much left to offer this division. Whether he's actually a threat to become a ranked contender would depend on getting past Landwehr, and the odds are fairly close. So I'll quiz you, Keith. Your favorite is -140. Your underdog +110. Who are they?
I'll say Landwehr is the favorite.
You are correct. Landwehr is the favorite. Tell me how you like this fight. Tell me who you think wins and what it looks like.
Yeah, like I already said, like there's other fights that deserve to be higher on the, I mean the Sterling Evloev fight should definitely be on the main card. Yeah, I think Van Durden, I think Brown Battle, like they should be on the main card, not this one. That said, I love this fight. Like, this is a great fight. Like, if this was the first fight of the night and a friend called me up and said, "Oh, dude, how do you think about the fights?" Yeah, I'm gonna come over, watch the fights you do. I'll be there at like 8 o'clock. I'll be like, dude, be there. It's freaking whatever time it starts, 6 o'clock. Because the first fight's gonna be a banger, you know. Because both these guys are absolute action fighters. Doo Ho Choi, I mean, UFC Hall of Famer. You know, he is a boxer that just loves to throw it out of the pocket. Now he's a little flat-footed. He is a stationary target. He has an incredible chin. Like, he doesn't care about getting hit because he lacks head movement, but he's got fast hands. He's got a nice snap on his shot. He has tight boxing. He attacks with straight punches down the pipe. He also likes to get inside and throw some tight hooks and some uppercuts. He attacks with combinations. He has really good power. He's got 12 TKOs. He doesn't throw a lot of kicks, so you don't expect that. He'll toss out some spinning attacks for fun. He's been hurt a lot in fights, but like, it doesn't stop him from keep coming. He doesn't wrestle. He's a bad defensive wrestler. If fight gets to the ground, he has one sub, but he likes to jump the gilly. So watch out for that. And he's got good cardio. Like, he's going to go hard. Landwehr is a nonstop pressure fighter, nonstop action. He just beats opponents with output. He's constantly moving forward and taking ground. He isn't very technical. He's definitely reckless. I go back to the Darren Elkins fight where, like, he's landing power shots, but he's completely squared up on him and it looks rock'em sock'em. So like, he's not very technical, but when he tries to be, he's not bad. He's got a nice jab, but he's going to get in the pocket. He's going to throw big power shots. I like when he throws kicks. He's got a good kicking game, nice heap kicks. He's got a quick high kick, good calf kicks. If he closes the distance, he could wrestle. We're working the clinch. He's not the best offensive wrestler, but he showed some good takedown defense against Darren Elkins. If taken down, he's got a good get-up game, and he's got good sub-defense when he's taken down. This fight is nuts. I mean, I love it. I thought Doo Ho Choi was done. Like, you know, I know when he left, but I mean, I didn't expect him to come back. And win fights, but man, like, I love that he's like back and having, you know, some success, beating Bill Algeo. Man, this is a tough fight to pick because both guys throw hard. Both guys don't give a shit about defense. I've kind of flip-flopped. I think Doo Ho Choi is more like a technical boxer of the two, which, I mean, they're both kind of brawlers, but man, I'm gonna go with him. I'm gonna go him in the upset. I'm gonna say he lands a shot or two, and I say he puts Landwehr out. Give me Choi. I'll say 3rd round TKO, back and forth fight. I bashed the fight for being on the main card, but this is my fight of the night pick. Like, I think it's gonna be a barn burner. So give me Choi.
Yeah, I like the breakdown. I love the fight, and couldn't have said it better. Like, me thinking that this fight probably should have been further down the card is nothing to do with how entertaining I expect the fight to be or how cool these guys are, because this fight is a front runner for fight of the night, and because it's on the main card, it now maybe has a little higher chance of winning if it turns into the fight we think it's going to be. I love a couple of the things that you mentioned there because they definitely line up with things that I was, you know, thinking of pointing out. The fact that when Landwehr really gets going, stance is almost irrelevant because he's just perfectly squared up to his foe, just wanting to swing down. And in Choi, he's got one of the guys in the featherweight division most likely to oblige him with that. I don't know who Choi's favorite fighter is. I'm sure if you asked him, it's probably like, you know, Chan Sung Jung or Ryo Chonan or some Korean legend, but it should be Dustin Poirier because in his best form, he's like Korean poor man's Dustin Poirier. Like just loves to throw down in the pocket and just trust his reflexes in his chin to have him come out on the better side of firefights. Lousy takedown defense that he makes worse by jumping guillotines, you know, like all the earmarks. I don't know how it is in Korea. I don't know at what point he's going to have to change his name to Korean Superman. It's kind of the thing, you know, kind of like when Lena Landsberg went from being elbow princess to elbow queen. Did elbow royalty have to die for her to like take the throne? I don't know. Choi is 33. Like you, I expected him to be gone forever. I mean, he had been on a 3-fight losing streak headed out of the UFC, including getting knocked out twice. And especially in the Jeremy Stevens fights, because of losing those close quarter exchanges that are normally his bread and butter. So I figure, so he's leaving on the tail end of 2 knockout losses. He's going to be in the Army for 4 years. Yeah, we might see him for one novelty fight in 2023, but he's done. Instead, he's looked pretty good. I think he's a little mellowed out compared to his first couple fights in the UFC. I think I called him this when we previewed one of his last 2 fights, but almost the throwback, the last of that classic early aughts South Korean fighter mold where they were just aggressive to a fault, offense first, second, third, last, and always, and just defense to the win. And he comes from Busan Team Mad that gave us like Ryo Chonan, Dong Hyun Kim, a lot of the real Korean wild men. He seems to have tailored that into like a still aggressive but slightly more controlled striking game that may let him continue doing this in the UFC into his 30s. Landwehr obviously is one of our guys. Like just the bite down on the mouth guard, ultra durable. The amount of punishment he's taken since joining the UFC like 4 or 5 years ago in wins as well as losses is alarming. He's another one of those guys like Darren Elkins, I really like Darren Elkins, that just win or lose always looks like he's been run over by a truck by the middle of the second round. But has been really hard to put away. Like Herbert Burns and Julian Erosa are both huge featherweights who hit really hard and caught him clean early in their fights. I mean, that can happen to anybody, and Choi could do that to Landwehr, like if they're just throwing down in the pocket in the first round. I think this is going to be a fantastic fight because both guys are probably going to want the same kind of fight, and the real question is just who's going to come out on top. I can totally see the mild upset, like you're calling, where just Choi lands more and is able to roll with or just absorb the punishment that's coming to him from Landwehr. If he can't, and especially if he can't do enough damage to Landwehr where we don't keep getting those situations, I do think it favors Landwehr as the fight goes on. So I'm going to call for Landwehr to hang on and win a decision in an obvious fight of the night candidate here. But if Choi catches him cleaner than I expect, or Landwehr's durability is slipping at all, a Choi knockout could happen at any moment. Should be a fantastic fight. Landwehr by decision for me. Next up on the UFC 310 main card is another featherweight matchup, this one featuring Bryce Mitchell and Kron Gracie. Mitchell, the 30-year-old Arkansas native, is 16-2 overall. He is 7-2 in the UFC. That's the good news. The bad news is that those 2 losses are within his last 3 fights, including his most recent outing. He fought most recently almost exactly a year ago. It was at UFC 296 on December 16th of last year, where Josh Emmett one-shotted him in one of the scariest knockouts of 2023 and a late contender for knockout of the year. He took all of 2024 off and was very open about it being for his health, for his recovery. So good on him. he returns now, and he faces Gracie. Kron Gracie, 36 years old, born in Brazil, lived back and forth between Brazil and Southern California for most of his life, just like his dad, the living legend Rickson Gracie, who, side note, if you don't know, maybe check the Sherdog front page, because within the last 2 or 3 days, there was a story about Rickson Gracie's struggle with Parkinson's disease. He's battling it, but, you know, a very revealing interview, including some anecdotes with other legends of his era in no holds barred fighting. Informative, touching, and obviously all of our best wishes to the legendary Rickson Gracie. At any rate, his son, Kron, last fought a year and a half ago. It was back in May of 2023, coming out on the wrong end of a unanimous decision against Charles Jourdain. That's at UFC 288. So he's been on the shelf for a while, and with Gracie, who frankly in MMA is a dilettante, it's always a question whether we get him back at all. He's decided he wants another fight, and he gets Mitchell. He also gets one of the widest lines on the card, as Mitchell is minus 700, Gracie plus 450. Here's the thing about Bryce Mitchell. I just said that, you know, the bad news is he's lost 2 of his last 3 fights after being kind of an undefeated sensation coming up. It's one thing to be undefeated in the UFC. We've just talked about Movsar Evloev, who's now 18-0, and kind of how quietly he's done that. Mitchell's the opposite. When you're a guy coming in, you know, to the UFC just kind of at random, another undefeated prospect, and you're wearing custom shorts within 2 fights, the UFC understands that it might have somebody marketable on its hands. In fact, I believe he was the first non-champ to get any sort of concession like that in the Reebok/Venom era. So Mr. Camo shorts. But here's the thing. He's lost 2 of his last 3 fights, but one, Ilia Topuria completely wrecked him, but Ilia Topuria has completely wrecked basically everybody he's fought, and he's going to continue to do so probably for a while now. He's done no worse than what he did to Mitchell, to a couple of pound for pound all-time greats in his last few fights. So it's nothing off Mitchell that he wasn't as good as Ilia Topuria 2 years ago. He may never be. The Emmett fight is a little different, but here's the thing. I know that if Bryce Mitchell and Ilia Topuria fight 10 times, Topuria probably wins all 10, and probably 9 of them are by finish. If Emmett and Mitchell fight 10 times, I don't know if Mitchell wins 3, 5, 7 of them, but he only gets flatlined by a Josh Emmett hook once. That's just it. These things happen in MMA sometimes, and it's not taking anything away from Emmett, because what a great moment for him. What a vindication for a guy that all of us, myself definitely included, thought was over the hill. But it doesn't tell me too much about Bryce Mitchell unless he gets knocked out or hurt badly again. And it tells me less than nothing about Bryce Mitchell fighting Kron Gracie. Because if there is a fighter in all of MMA less capable of knocking out Bryce Mitchell with 1 punch than Kron Gracie, I'm not sure who it is. But it might be a female atomweight. Gracie is such a throwback old school specialist that, frankly, he doesn't belong in the UFC. He doesn't. That's nothing against him. You know, again, he's Rickson's son. He's Horian's nephew. He should, if he wants to fight, give him a fight. But on skills, he doesn't belong in the modern UFC. He is an incredible grappler. He's one of the best grapplers of his generation in his weight range. You know, alongside Hojer, you know, maybe the 2 best Gracies, kind of that generation of the family. And to the extent and the level of fighters he was taking on in MMA, it crossed over seamlessly. He completely destroyed everybody on the ground, including an over-the-hill Tatsuya Kawajiri and a sneaky good Alex Caceres. Just completely wrecked all of them before running into kind of actual UFC level competition in Cub Swanson and Charles Jourdain. All I really need to know about this is I think Mitchell can keep this on the feet if he wants. And while Mitchell's striking is not polished, he has a certain amount of natural power up until getting flatlined by Emmett. He had pretty good durability and toughness. This is going to either turn into a nothing fest like the Swanson versus Gracie fight did, where just basically nothing happened and it was the only bad Cub Swanson fight ever. Or it's going to turn into something really sad where Gracie is like butt scooting and pulling guard and trying to taunt Mitchell into going to the ground with him. Mitchell might be able to survive on the ground against Gracie. He is a wonderful MMA grappler in his own right. I think he's going to be bigger and stronger than Gracie, but I don't think he has to. Give me Bryce Mitchell by decision in kind of a ho-hum fight. And if they book this hoping for a sensational grapple fest, I don't think they're going to get it. I don't think this fight touches the ground very much at all.
This, so I was talking about how like loaded this card is, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at 14 fights, and this is the fight I'm least interested in on the entire card. This fight should, I mean, we talk about should be on the card or not. This fight shouldn't be on the main card. This shouldn't be on the card in general. Kron Gracie is 36 years old. Dude hasn't won a fight in 5 years. I mean, the guy's a jiu-jitsu guy. That's what he is. I mean, he's obviously he's a Gracie, but there's no reason for the UFC to have this fight even on the roster. It's like there's people who deserve the spot more than Kron Gracie. The name it doesn't ring out like it used to. You know what I mean? Where people I remember when Matt Hughes fought against Hoist. Yeah, and I remember my friend Jeff Reyes. Shout out to my friend Jeff Reyes. He's the one who recently passed away. But yeah, he was an MMA fan. He was kind of like starting at that time becoming an MMA fan. He was new, and he knew the Gracie's fan. And he's like, "Who's going to win that fight?" I'm like, "Man, he's going to murder him." What do you mean? Like it's gonna be slower. And he was like, "Nah, man, the Gracie and the jiu-jitsu." And like people don't have that reaction anymore. Right. You know, when it comes to jiu-jitsu, it's like, yeah, everybody can do a little bit of jiu-jitsu. There's people who are better than the rest of them, and like the Gracies are. But it's like being a plumber. Like, yeah, there's people who are better plumbers, but like any handy, like halfway decent handyman can do plumbing. Like I could do it. But I've had a house for 15 years. I've changed the hot water heater. I've unclogged things. Like just shut the fuck up, plumbers. Like give me a break. Anybody can do plumbing. It's pretty easy. Yeah, like could I replace an entire septic system? No, but whatever. Like that's what jiu-jitsu is at this point. You know, it's plumbing. Like anyway, I'm just obviously it's late. I'm just talking shit, literally. But anyways, I remember Marlon Wayans. They were asking people in the crowd who they could win. Like the people who are like real like MMA celebrities would be like, "Oh, Matt Hughes," and then there was like Marlon Wayans, like, "Oh, Holy Spirit's gonna give me one of those like finger lock shit." And obviously, he's being like funny, being Marlon Wayans, but like there's some like belief in that, and that's what I feel like. Are you still trying to reach that crowd? Like, Kron Gracie, I mean, he's a southpaw that he tries moving forward, fighting behind a hard guard defense, trying to pillar, but he stands up way too tall. He has no head movement. He's so hittable. His offensive striking is pretty much non-existent. To his credit, he did show some toughness and durability to eat shots. I mean, he was eating shots from Cub Swanson, from Charles Jourdain, and you know, he went, you know, the whole distance in those fights. But right, he made a decision against. Yeah, he made a distance against Cub Swanson, right? Or did he get stuck?
Yep.
Yeah. But he really struggled with the movement and athleticism of Swanson and Jourdain, and these are years ago. Like, I don't think he's going to magically get more athletic. He's a terrible wrestler. He really doesn't shoot for takedowns. He just reaches. When he does shoot, his entries are ugly. He doesn't drive through the hips at all. Now, don't get me wrong. If he gets the fight to the ground, he's the guy he's the plumber you call when you have to have your whole septic system replaced. I mean, he's a wizard. He's great at winning scrambles. He's got smothering top game. He's very flexible. He can get subs from every position, top, bottom, in a scramble. But I mean, let's talk about Mitchell real quick. Mitchell is southpaw. I think his striking is a little underrated. He lands more than you think because his opponents are kind of concerned with his grappling. Maybe not be the case with Conor Gracie. Gracie probably wants the grappling, but he's constantly not probably wants. He definitely wants the grappling, but he's constantly moving forward. He's on the gas. He's a pressure striker that beats people up with volume. He's got a big kicking game. His kicks are good, but he usually uses them to close the distance, and he follows the kicks to get into the pocket. He has good entries that he usually sets up by forcing his opponent onto their back foot. He kind of has this Glover to Shearers, like snatch single type game, but I wouldn't categorize him as a wrestler. He's more of a just kind of create a scramble, win those scrambles, constantly like keeping his hips moving, following the hips. And he's obviously he gets to fight the ground. He's good. He's got a good top game. He's got some fast back takes. He's flexible. He's a submission artist. He can get subs from every position. I mean, he got the twister in one fight. He isn't a great defensive wrestler. He loves to kind of hit switches and stuff when taken down, and kind of a kind of funk style to his game. I was surprised how easily he was subbed by Eli Sport. Again, a loss that hasn't, it doesn't look too bad on your resume, but still, like the way it wasn't getting knocked out by Tori, he was getting subbed by him. I am worried about his chin. I agree that it was a good time to take time off for his own health after that. I mean, Emmett's KO is as bad as it gets. And let's face it, that's a dude that probably can't afford any more brain damage as it is. This fight depends on how dumb Mitchell is. I mean, he has subbed by Topuria, and he can't possibly think that it'd be a good idea to be like, he's a black belt, I'm a black belt, let's grapple. I can't. I mean, Mitchell's dumb. He's a dumb dude. And I'm not talking about his politics. I'm talking about all the other whack.
Yeah.
Like he's the guy that makes Republicans look bad.
I mean, let me interject though. Having said that, after the Emmett knockout, where he just made a post like the next morning, like thanking Emmett for like not tacking on unnecessary ground shots and him taking the whole year off. If that is a sign he's always going to be kind of like a weird hick dude. Like this isn't the last time he's going to
do that on Twitter or something
with a drill. Yeah. But
did he do it, or did his manager? Because I don't think he knows how to log on to Twitter.
His manager spelling can't be that bad.
Yeah.
But if that's a sign that he is turning some sort of corner and becoming at least like an adult weird hick, that's progress, man.
I love it. What I expect to say, I think you picked it out. I think you broke it down perfectly. Like I expect this to be like Mitchell kicking him, punching him, Gracie like butt scooting, challenging him to the fight, or walking forward with his hands real high, and Mitchell just kind of sidestepping him. I think this fight's gonna be really ugly. I think it's gonna be mostly standing, and Mitchell just easily pointing him. Give me Mitchell in a really ugly 15-minute win.
Third from the top at UFC 310 is a heavyweight clash between Ciryl Gane and Alexander Volkov. Gane, the 34-year-old Frenchman, is 12-2 overall. He's 9-2 in the UFC, and he is coming in off of a win. He fought most recently all the way back in September of 2023, where he knocked out Sergey Spivak late in the second round after doing pretty dominant work over the first 8 minutes of the fight. That allowed him to put in the rear view the bad memories of his second shot at the UFC title, where John Jones folded him last March at UFC 285. Gane now has 2 unsuccessful UFC title shots in his undisputed title shots. He is a former interim champ. If he wants a third, he's going to have to get past Alexander Volkov, who's still looking for his first. Volkov, 36-year-old Russian, 38-10 overall, 12-4 since joining the UFC as a former heavyweight champ in both M1 Global and Bellator. He is coming into this fight on a 4-fight win streak. All the way back in March of 2022, he got ruined by Tom Aspinall. a loss that, again, has aged pretty well. Since then, he has wins over Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Alexander Romanov, Tai Tuivasa, and Sergey Pavlovich. The most recent of those, the Pavlovich fight, was at UFC on ABC, Whitaker versus Alaskarov back in June. So he's looking to make it 5 in a row. And as a perennial kind of gatekeeper to the top 5, he is maybe on the cusp of a title shot if he can beat Gane in uncontroversial fashion. We'll see what happens. But if the odds makers are to be believed, we don't have to think about it too hard, as Gane is a comfortable minus 350, Volkov plus 275. I have feelings about who's going to win the fight. I've got an intuition, some thoughts about it, even though I've picked Gane fights wrong a lot recently. But one thing that I'm pretty sure about is that, considering what a high level fight this is, again, 2 top 5, top 6-ish heavyweights in a potential title eliminator, I am more confident that this is going to be a stinker fight than just about any fight that high level, because these are 2 big heavyweights. They're both pretty athletic in their own way. Like, Gane is athletic for anything. Volkov is surprisingly nimble for just such a huge frame. They're 2 of the better technical strikers in the heavyweight division. Really, they're 2 of the better technical strikers in the history of the heavyweight division. But they are also 2 guys who are willing to force the other guy to go first, almost to a fault. They are, all of their best highlights come when frustrated or desperate heavyweights are running right at them. That is when Gane destroys Derek Lewis. That's when Gane destroys Tai Tuivasa. That's when Volkov folds people in half with front kicks to the gut. Here, where it's 2 guys that really want the other guy to go first really badly, I think this is going to be dreadful. And I see that, I mean, Volkov is a pretty massive underdog, and I don't understand why, because the thing is, this fight is going to lend itself to very difficult to score rounds, and it's only a 3-round fight. So there only has to be 1 confusing round and 1 easily confused judge, and this fight is a splitter for either guy. I mean, Gane, extremely light on his feet for a 6'5", 250-pound guy. Great movement, good lateral movement that so few heavyweights have. He is not a high power striker in terms of not swinging hard, and he's also not a very high volume striker. If he can beat you just sliding around the outside and flicking out a leg kick and a jab 10 times in a round, he's going to do it. When people force the issue on him, he has good weapons inside. And while Ngannou and Jones both have exposed Gane's defensive wrestling badly at this point, it remains to be seen whether just anybody can do that. Because if the whole scouting report was Gane's defensive wrestling sucks, that's how you beat him, Sergey Spivak would have beaten him, because after Jones and Ngannou, he's right on the next tier of best wrestlers at heavyweight in the UFC, and he got nothing going against Gane. So until Gane runs into another wrestler with not just the technique, but the will to apply it and the physical horsepower of a John Jones or a Francis Ngannou, he might just be the heavyweight George St. Pierre and just chip out not terribly entertaining decision wins over people that just can't handle his rhythm. Volkov, a little of the same vibe. He is 6'7", seems even bigger than that. Like, I always forget that he's not like 6'10" or something like Stefan Struve, just because he fights tall. He is a tall, rangy heavyweight that's always understood that's where his best advantage lay. I've talked numerous times about how impressed I am with his improvement in the UFC, and a lot of it is physical improvement. He's put on about 20 pounds of muscle, and it's turned him from a terrible defensive wrestler into a more passable one, and he's gotten more aggressive about doing the whole, as Lorosenko puts it, advertising the price of admission. He's gotten better and more aggressive about punishing people on the way in that he thinks are going to try and take him down. His front kick to the body is it's semi-Schilt like. In just when he catches a shorter heavyweight with it, it's almost comical how hard he's kicking them in the gut and how far out of their own punching range that guy is while he's hitting them. Like he's skewering people with the ball of his foot that couldn't put their fist within like 3 feet of his chin. But like Gane, like Volkov is vulnerable if he has like a very, very good and persistent wrestler who wants him on the ground, like Curtis Blades, like Tom Aspinall. Otherwise, he's going to win he's going to win a striking battle where he's not applying any of the pressure. Like if somebody wants to keep coming, running at him, he can wreck him like Alexander Romanov. But if they want to just hang around on the outside looking mystified like Sergey Pavlovich did in his most recent fight, he's happy to do that as well. Both of these guys seem kind of immune to the booze, and I think they're probably going to be some in Vegas on Saturday. And in a fight that, again, I think is going to, I almost never pick a split decision, but I think it's very likely we get a splitter here because, again, I think we're going to have 3 individually difficult to score rounds. And give me Volkov to pull it out. Give me Volkov to just offer up something a little more eye-friendly to the judges as probably the guy that is staking out space in the middle of the cage, moving forward, throwing longer strikes as Gane is giving ground, sliding to the outside. I don't think he's going to necessarily do more damage than Gane. I don't think there's going to be probably too much damage in this fight at all. But give me Volkov to pick up 2 rounds out of 3 on the scorecards of 2 of the 3 people that matter. Volkov by decision in another, I guess, big upset.
Nice. Yeah. I'm surprised the line was that big. I kind of feel similar about this way this fight will be played out. Like I expect it to be just a kickboxing match from distance. Gane, I still think is probably the most athletic heavyweight there is. Obviously he's get up there in age, but he's a heavyweight, so like the age doesn't matter as much as the other weight classes. But he's got great footwork. He can work from the outside so well. He sets a pace with the footwork. He has always won like a slow outside kickboxing match, and many of his opponents give him that. But to his credit, he did come out way more aggressive against Sergey Spivak in his last fight. He keeps his opponents guessing by switching stance, and he stays very relaxed, composed. He's got fast hands. He's accurate. Works behind a jab. He'll double it up. He throws nice straight shots down the pipe. He likes to wrap punches around his opponent's guard if they shell or they pillar. He attacks with combinations. He changes stance in mid combo to get different angles. It's one of my favorite techniques. He works the body well. He has power, but he isn't the cracker that people think he is. He's not really a big power puncher. I mean, he did start Tai Tuivasa, but he's a heavyweight, obviously, so he's got some power. But good kicking game. Nice teep kicks. He got a crushing body kicks, hard leg kicks. He got good stepping knees. For a guy who isn't known for his grappling, he will occasionally sneak in a takedown, but his overall grappling is, as everyone knows, kind of stinks. He stinks on top. He has some ground and pound, but his defensive wrestling is bad. He struggles to get off the bottom. We saw John Jones obviously smoke him on the ground. We saw him not be able to get up on the bottom against Francis Ngannou. Though I do think Francis Ngannou's ground game, especially that ground and pound, is scary and a little underrated. He showed improved takedown defense against Sergey Spivak. That's the guy who's going to want to take him down. But I still can't get out the terrible fight IQ, like him going for a heel hook against Francis Ngannou, in the 5th round of an extremely close fight. Volkov, he's huge heavyweight. He's almost 7 feet tall. He's stronger than he looks. He looked really sensational against Pavlovich in the way that he can look, like as sensational Volkov can for the way he fights. But it was, I shouldn't say sensational. That's probably like being too nice, but like as comfortable, I should say. Like he was just like he got exactly the fight he needed, and just came through. he's a good striker. He's technical. He works by the jab. He's good at keeping his opponents at bay with his straight long shots. He also used footwork to keep his range, for keeping his opponents from sliding inside on him. He just touches and then he unloads when there's power openings for him to land big shots. He's accurate. He's got underrated power. He's got a good kicking game, especially to the body. He likes those teep kicks. He also has like a Holly Holmes side kick where he pushes his opponents back. He needs to check calf kicks. Tuivasa battered up his legs. He's got a solid chin. I mean, still to this day, Derek Lewis is the only person that's been able to really hurt him bad. He does struggle if he's taken to the ground. Curtis Blades took him down like 14 times in 5 rounds. And he was just smoked on the ground by Tom Aspinall. But again, like that's a loss that doesn't look too bad. But he showed him some slick ground game against Tai Tuivasa. Again, take that for what it's worth. I mean, Volkov has looked really great lately, but we've already seen these guys fight. And my question is, like, what has changed since their first fight? I think it's going to look very similar to the first fight, and I'm going the opposite way. I think Gon is still going to be faster. He's going to stick and move. I think he's just going to be too fast for Volkov. Give me Gon by decision.
All right. And through 12 fights of the 14, we still have yet to pick a unanimous upset. I don't know what our listeners are going to do.
Oh.
That brings us to the co-main event of UFC 310, a scheduled 5-round welterweight contenders matchup between Shavkat Rakhmonov and Ian Garry. Rakhmonov, the 30-year-old Kazakhstani, is 18-0 as a professional. He is 6-0 since joining the UFC. He will be making his first walk to the cage of 2024. Fought most recently at UFC 296 last December, where he tapped out Stephen Thompson late in the second round. He had been scheduled to challenge Bilal Muhammad for the welterweight title. Muhammad was forced to withdraw a couple weeks ago with a foot injury that turned into like a bone infection. He's out. Ian Garry is in, and it remains a 5-round fight, though it is not a title fight. Garry, the 27-year-old Irishman, is 15-0 as a professional. He's 8-0 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Cage Warriors welterweight champ. He has already fought twice this year, taking a split decision over Jeff Neal back in February and a unanimous decision over Michael Venom Page at UFC 303 in June. He will look to make it 9 in a row in the UFC, 16 in a row as a pro, and perhaps usurp Rakhmonov's presumptive title shot. He is not favored to do so, however, as Rakhmonov is a comfortable -400 favorite, Garry +300 as your underdog. Keith, definitely flipping this one to you, but just the fact that we have two fighters with a combined record of 33-0, I'm sure either Sherdog's Jay Petrie or the UFC's booth on, throughout this week will let us know if this is the highest, win total for a matchup of undefeated fighters ever. Because I'm thinking back and like Lyoto Machida versus Rashad Evans, they were 15-0 and 15-0-1, and this would even top that. So
and what you mean by that is Jay Petrie will put it out there, and then the UFC booth will steal his stat and not credit him.
Well, John Anik is good about crediting. He's especially good about crediting Tom Feely that does our text UFC previews. If it's anyone else, I don't want to get I'm 100% convinced that when I used to do the Contender Series preview, that a certain British man would steal my information a lot and not give me any credit for it. I'm not going to say who that was, and when I say British man, I don't think Dan Hardy was on the broadcast team then. Yeah,
anyways,
we know what you mean.
Maybe former middleweight champion. He can beat me up, so we'll call it even. God, this fight is so fucking good. This fight is probably you know, let me get to the fighters first, and then we'll talk about how excited I am for this fight. Shavkat Rakhmonov, I mean, the guy is the scariest dude going in MMA right now. I mean, he's what would you say, 18-0, 18 stoppages.
18-0, 18 stoppages.
That's insane. That is insane. Like and then like stopping good dudes. I mean, the guy's massive for the weight class. He's huge. It looks like a light heavyweight. He's obviously, the ultimate finisher, never been to a decision. He's well-rounded. He's got like a bunch of knockouts, tons of submissions. He's a very intelligent fighter that goes to where he has his advantage. He's a little bit of a slow starter though. Like he's not flawless. Like he hasn't lost rounds. I mean, like he was kind of slow starting against Stephen Thompson, but he's calm. He's calculated. He presses his opponent's back. He works behind a good jab, short, tight inside strikes. He works the body well. He's got serious power. He does defensively back straight up, which kind of seems like his biggest flaw. He stands a little tall, but he has a great chin. I mean, he was walking through punches from Jeff Neal, and we know that Jeff Neal's obviously a power puncher. If he closes distance, I mean, dude is dangerous. He's got strong clinch boxing. He's a solid wrestler. I've said this before. I think his wrestling is overrated. I don't, I don't think he's a world class MMA wrestler, but obviously he takes you down. It's more what he does when he gets it down. He gets his body lock takedowns. His grappling's good. I mean, his I don't think his entries are that good, but if he gets on, he smothers his opponents. And Neil Magny, Stephen Thompson, he just drowned those two guys. I mean, again, two guys aren't really known for their grappling. I mean, Magny is a little bit more offensive and defensive, but two guys who kind of struggle on the ground. But I mean, he puts them out quick. 9 submission wins. I think it's 10
now.
Yeah, 10. I'm sorry. Now. Yeah, I didn't update my notes. I mean, he subbed Alex Oliveira, he subbed Michelle Paredes, Neil Magny, Stephen Thompson. That is the biggest fan. If he can take Ian Machado Gary down, that's a scary man to be on top of you. Credit to Machado Gary, who, I mean, I guess, this is a title eliminator, but to go from headlining a fight night against Joaquin Buckley to fighting a week earlier against Shavkat Rakhmonov, not bashing Joaquin Buckley, that's a scary man too, but I know they said that there was many phone calls before Ian Machado Gary was the one to say yes. I've talked about Ian Machado Gary's confidence before to step up to fight Shavkat. That tells you everything, like willing to risk your fight a guy like that. Thing about it is, I talked about how big Shavkat is. Ian Machado Gary is actually even taller. He's long and lengthy. He doesn't have the reach advantage, but he's long and lengthy. He's very athletic, good footwork. He's a good striker. He's a builder who gets stronger every fight. Very relaxed, technical, works from the outside. He's got fast hands. He's accurate. He tends to measure his foe. He works behind a crisp jab. He attacks with combinations. He slips and rips well. He works the body well. Good head movement. He kind of baits his opponent because he keeps his hands low, which is dangerous, especially with a power puncher like Shavkat Rakhmonov. But he counters because of that, because it's good head movement. He's got some power. I like his stepping knees where he kind of keeps his opponents from crashing the pocket. He's got a big kicking game, a lot of inside kicks, great calf kicks, got a quick high kick. We saw that against Daniel Rodriguez. He's got a judo background, but he's pretty mediocre at his offensive wrestling. And he'll occasionally get a takedown. I mean, he was taking down Michael Venom Page. Okay top game, but let's say he's pretty decent ground and pound. He does attack submissions, particularly like head attacks, Darce chokes, anacondas. He's got those long legs. He's actually like surprisingly hard to take down because he spreads those legs and he's tall. He's kind of like that tall man's defense. And this fight is amazing. I think this is my favorite matchup that is like currently booked. With the only other fight that I can think of that's in the same realm, like high level. I'm not talking about like, mid-card fight that I'm super excited about, but I mean, Islam and Armin. Yeah. And I know that's technically not completely signed, but I mean, this fight is so freaking good. I never do this, But and especially with a title fight on the top, there's certain fights that to me are bigger than title fights. You talked about 2 undefeated guys, 2 guys who can win titles. Shavkat doesn't have he has this like mystique about him where he like doesn't talk much. He's very quiet. Says like one line at press conferences. It's not in English, but it has that like Alex Bejeda feel to it where like it somehow works. And then obviously Ian Machado Gary is like, like he's charismatic where either you love him or hate him.
Yep.
And it seems like more people hate him, which is I've always said they hate him for weird reasons, but whenever people hate him, and that's to me, if that's UFC, that's a good thing. I think this fight should be the main event. That's me. That's not a knock on Pantoja. That's not a knock on Asakura. Not a knock on flyweight. I'm the biggest flyweight fan on the planet Earth. This fight is just that big. It's gonna be what all the headlines are this week. They're the embeddeds, your press conference, it's gonna be the fight that's gonna be talked. I mean, unless the main event is something crazy, but it's what's the fight is gonna be all talked about. Either Shavkat just runs through and it's like holy shit, he's scared someone, or Gary pulls out the upset and says some crazy stuff, and he kind of has that like kind of Sean O'Malley where people hate him, but man, you can't deny how good he is. I just love this fight, man. It comes down to me, can Gary move enough to keep his range and work with distance and use his speed, his kicking? If Rakhmonov closes the distance and he gets him down, I think it's a wrap. If there's a one-sided thrashing, I expect Shavkat to win. Like, I don't think Gary smashes him. I mean, like, he could get a knockout or something like that, but like, I don't expect him to win 5 rounds to nothing, blanking him from being much faster. I am a Gary believer. I think this fight is much closer than the betting lines thinks. Just the fact that you haven't seen this guy lose. Like, you've said this before, how like it's hard to imagine someone losing or something happening they've never seen. I do think he's faster and probably more accurate than Shavkat. I think striking, he's more athletic, and he actually probably has more tools in the striking realm, more variety, I should say. Shavkat's more variety overall. Like, he's more well-rounded. Like, obviously, I think he has advantage on the ground game. He hits harder. I think 25 minutes helps Shavkat due to, he's been a guy that's lost rounds and then he just needs one moment and then the fight's over. So I do think if I was taking Gary, I'd feel more confident if it was a 15-minute fight, like he could bang 2 rounds and try to hold on. If he gets out early, and I think he needs to get out early, can he hold on through round 3, round 4, round 5? That's a big if. Man, I've really flip-flopped. Like, I give Ian Machado Gary a much better line than Vegas does. I think both guys are going to have their moments. I think both guys might be in trouble at times. I think it's going to be razor close. Someone's always got to go. I said I give Ian Machado Gary a better chance than Vegas does. That's why Shavkat's always going. I'm taking Machado Gary. I backed my boy. I picked him a year ago in my fantasy. I'm backing this guy. This might be a crazy pick. I'm gonna say he's gonna be faster, and I think I'll strike him. Give me Ian Machado Gary. I'll say split decision.
Gary's sitting at plus 300. That's definitely one of the 5 biggest upsets you've picked this year. Maybe one of the 5 biggest upsets either of us has picked this year. And I love the breakdown, even all the way up to your pick, because, and I feel like I say this every week now, but whenever there's a line that's minus 400 or greater, I'll start from the opposite proposition. Okay, if the upset happens, what does it look like? And sometimes there's just nothing.
But this one's like a pretty obvious one, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. This one has like obvious routes to victory for the underdog, and they're difficult routes to victory, which is why the line is what it is. But they are things that Gary can do, and they're things that he has done to other people. He's just never done them to somebody as good as Shavkat Rakhmonov. But conversely, if he wins this in uncontroversial fashion, this is probably Rakhmonov's best win yet as well. So I do think this is going to be a one-sided showing for Rakhmonov, and that's nothing off of Gary. Just one, Rakhmonov is closer to his prime. He's 30 right now. Like, you know, between 29 and 32, physically, he's probably the best he's ever going to be. Whereas Gary is still just 27 years old. He may still be improving, but right now, I do think it's going to be kind of one-sided. I think Gary is going to give Rakhmonov trouble in the early going. Might hit him some, might hurt him. It's going to be difficult for Rakhmonov to corner Gary against the fence and get takedowns the way he likes to get them. I think in some ways this might play out a little bit like Rakhmonov's fight with Jeff Neal, whom, you know, Gary also fought, and Gary's fight with him was much closer, but Neal hurt Rakhmonov in the first round. You know, Rakhmonov hadn't dealt with a boxer that crisp with that good effortless power and decent takedown defense. Like, eventually,
Shavkat got the finish. Shavkat got the finish, but it was closer until he did get the finish.
Exactly. Like, once he started rolling downhill, you look at Rakhmonov's record on, you know, Sherdog, and you're like, oh, it's another rear naked choke win. He must have just washed Neal. But that's not the case. He's actually faced some adversity in that fight. I could see him getting that from Gary. I could see Gary even winning the first round. But you said it for me when you said that once Rakhmonov gets to the ground, it's probably a wrap. And I think that's especially true if it's on the early side in the fight and on the early side in the round in question. Even if Rakhmonov is able to get Gary down in the first round, I think Gary makes it out of that round and makes a good showing, just because he himself is, you know, not a bad grappler. He's so big and strong physically, but I'm thinking Rakhmonov gets him down in the second round, and just that it's just like watching a python swallow a goat. Once he gets someone on the ground, even if it takes a while, you can't take your eyes off it, and there's just zero chance that the goat's ever going to escape. Like, that python could take 15 minutes to swallow that goat, but the goat's not going anywhere. That's what it feels like. Like when Rakhmonov gets a lot of these guys on the ground, and as good as Gary is, I think it's going to be another case of that. Give me Rakhmonov by second round submission. That doesn't mean Gary is a bust. In fact, considering that I think Rakhmonov is likely to be your welterweight champ a year from now, these guys might meet again for a title somewhere down the road, and I might have a whole different take on the fight, because, again, I think Gary is still improving, and I think he's very much the real deal. But Rakhmonov is Rakhmonov time right now, and I think it's going to look like it on Saturday. With that, we come to the main event of UFC 310. A flyweight title fight between your reigning and defending champ, Alexandre Pantoja, and the debuting Kai Asakura. But before we talk about either of them, we need to talk for a moment about Alateng Heili, Mongolian bantamweight in the UFC. What does he have to do with this fight, you ask? Well, in about almost 7 years ago, in I think March or May of 2017, Kai Asakura fought Alateng Heili in Road FC in Korea. Why is that important? Because that is the last time Kai Asakura made 125 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
Spring of 2017. Asakura is coming to the UFC as one of Rizin Fighting Federation's biggest stars and, frankly, best fighters. But he's coming in as a former bantamweight champ. I'll talk more about that in a sec. Let's introduce these guys first. Your champ, Pantoja, 34-year-old Brazilian, fighting out of Florida. He's 28-5 overall. He's 12-3 in the UFC. He is, of course, your flyweight champ. He dethroned Brandon Moreno at UFC 290 last July. Since then, he has title defenses against Brandon Royval and Steve Erceg. The most recent of those, the Urseg fight, was back in May. So he's going for his third title defense right here, which, as incredible as it sounds, the last two champs, Davis and Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno, never achieved that. I mean, he's going to slide right in as second to Demetrius Johnson for most title defenses in UFC men's flyweight history if he can beat Asakura. Asakura, 31-year-old from Japan, 21-4 overall. As I mentioned, this will be his UFC debut, obviously, but he comes in on a 2-fight win streak and then an entire year off. Last time we saw him was on New Year's Eve, 2023, where he frankly beat the brakes off of Juan Archuleta, who was representing Bellator in one of the Bellator versus Ryzen kind of New Year's Eve extravaganzas. Asakura on the shelf for all of 2024. No major injuries or anything. I think it's just kind of contract stuff working its way out. And hopefully, for all the reasons I mentioned before, Asakura taking the long and correct way around to rebuilding his body to compete in this weight class. Because as I mentioned, he hasn't fought at 125 pounds in almost 7 years. Well, hell, he had 2 great fights with Manel Kape in Ryzen. Of the 2 of them, Kape was the guy that actually fought at flyweight from time to time, and he had a hell of a time making flyweight once he got to the UFC. Honestly, Asakura versus the Scale on Friday is, I'm not going to say it's as interesting as the main event because it's going to be a great fight, but it bears watching. It is surprising to me that the UFC brought someone like Asakura in and slotted him straight into a title shot without even a trial run against a fringe top 10 125 pounder just to prove he could do it, knock any rust out. I mean, the guy's been fighting in a ring. He's been fighting at 135 pounds, and he's coming into this fight off of a dominating win over Juan Archuleta. That's just, none of that really tells me how he's going to do in a UFC flyweight title fight. What is going to tell me how he does in a UFC flyweight title fight is Keith Shillan. Keith, talk to me about this fight.
I mean, this, even though I just said that Gary versus Rakhmonov should be the main event, I'm super excited for this fight. Like, it's a really good one. I'm a big fan of Asakura. I mean, the guy's such a great addition to the UFC, and you know how big I'm on to Pantoja. I think I asked you, Dana White, about this. Like, I think he should have got a one fight, one, to introduce Asakura to UFC fans, not MMA world, because the real MMA, the hardcores know who Asakura is, but more to the, I don't want to say casuals, but just the ones who really just follow just UFC. Watch about UFC every week, but
Americans who don't want to stay up at 4 a.m. to watch Ryzen.
Yeah. Or I mean, a lot of them will watch a replay, but yeah. Mm-hmm. And also, I asked him about the weight issue, and Dano just completely, I don't know if you saw the press conference, he just completely blew me off. It was the post-fight press conference, and I asked him, like, you worried you might ruin your main event? And he did the whole Japanese fighters historically fight up weight and all this stuff. He's got a tough test. I mean, he's getting thrown right to the walls. I mean, obviously, he's fighting for the title. Pantoja is a much more well-rounded fighter than he gets credited for. I've constantly said that. He's a much better striker than he gets credit for. He's got fast hands. He's a pocket boxer. He loves to throw down in the pocket. He loves to brawl. He's willing to eat a shot, and he doesn't move his head enough, but he's willing to eat one to land one of his own big ones. He's got good power. I mean, go back to like the Wilson Hayes knockout, the Machinel knockout. He dropped Brandon Moreno in their title fight. He hurt Brandon Royval in their title fight. The way he fights, he kind of stands on the outside. He waits, and then he bursts in, and he fights, like quick flurries. He also changes the speed of his blitzes. I saw that a lot in his last fight, which was pretty impressive. Like, he, changing the timing, so it's hard to kind of catch him coming in. He's great at like landing strikes, because if he throws strikes to your face and you block him, he's gonna shoot in and take you down. But if you like drop your hands to block a takedown, then he's gonna punch you in the face. Like he's really good at that, kind of getting you guessing. He's a very good wrestler. I mean, he's got like, I don't know how many takedowns in the UFC, like 100 takedowns in the UFC. I mean, he takes everybody down. He's good at getting the hips and cutting the angle. I have like kids I coach in wrestling, and I think Pantoja is a good person to teach like little kids how to wrestle, because you know, he's not the highest, you know, he's not freaking Kyle Dake shooting takedowns or something like that, but his, like, I'm on your hips and then I'm turning the corner, I'm using my head, I'm cutting the angle, and I'm moving, teaching guys to not wait for them to sprawl. Like, that's what he does. He's on you and he's already taking you back before you even realize he's on you. He also has some body lock takedowns. He's got fantastic back takes. With all due respect to Aljamain Sterling, who's on this card, yeah, Pantoja might be the best back taker in UFC history. Or, you know, he's up there. I mean, I guess, you know, Charles Oliveira and some of these other guys, but you know, Sterling and Pantoja are like two of the first ones that come to my mind.
And this is a card that also has Michael Chiesa on it, that where, I mean, we've forgotten.
Well,
yeah,
there you go. There's another good one. yeah, that's a good point. Well, which, I mean, it has Con Gracie, who could do it.
Yeah.
So,
if you can get someone on the ground.
Yeah, if you can get someone on the ground. Yeah. You know, on top, he's got a great top game. He advances position on the ground. Obviously he's a great overall submission artist. He's got 10 subs on his record. He crushed Alex Perez with a neck crank. He can get subs from top, bottom, in scrambles. He's got a wide variety of submissions. Something I've said about him a lot. Arm bars, guillotines, heel hooks. I mean, he's got everything. He's got, you know, great control. If he gets put on his back, sometimes he plays BJJ a little too much instead of getting up. But I've seen him hit sweeps. I've seen him pop up to his feet. He showed he has the cardio to go all 25 minutes. I mean, this fight is 25 minutes. Pantoja has no problem with that. He's mentally strong enough. He will slow down a little, but he's smart enough to kind of learn how to conserve his energy. I've seen him take rounds off or take big moments in rounds, or if he gets on top and kind of just hold and stall and kind of regain his energy. He's very smart with that. Like I say, he'll fight in spurts. And then he's got a legendary chin. I mean, the guy walks through punches and really hasn't been hurt that often. Asakura, first of all, like I'm with you. I'm super worried if he's going to make weight. And then how will he look when he does make weight? Mm-hmm. That's the big thing. Alateng Heili, I know I butchered his name. Alateng Heili is one thing. Fighting UFC main event, Alejandro Pantoja, that's a different thing. You know, you not only do you have to make the weight, but now you have to be the best in the world at that weight. Like
and you have to fight for 5 rounds.
And fight for 5 rounds against the best guy in the world. So, like, what a feat that is. And then the time travel and all those things that, like, it's not a guy who's been, you know, a Japanese fighter who's been fighting a lot in America. He's been fighting on his time zone. So, that's one thing. We don't get too much into that stuff. But I don't think it takes that big of a, and I know he's trained in America and stuff. I know he's trained a lot in America. So it might not be that big a factor, but something just to consider. He's a great athlete. He's a really good athlete. He's very big for the weight class, especially if, you know, he makes flyweight. He's a good striker. He's a power striker though. He's got short, tight boxing, huge power. He throws power to every shot. Like he's an advanced Takanori Gomi. He's what Takanori Gomi would have been in 2000.
Kept things tighter. Not as loopy.
Yeah, because Takanori Gomi had like a Vanderlei Silva like style, but my point is like advanced, like what it should be, like as athletes advanced. He throws a lot of power shots. He really leaps into his shots. He can get wild with his shots. He can load up on his shots. He'll throw a lot of looping. He's kind of like a Japanese Kai Kara France, where he can kind of overthrow, trying to knock your head off. But if he connects, man, he has power. He'll throw some kicks, not the biggest kicking game. Has a pretty quick high kick, some low kicks, but it's his knees. I mean, his step and knee against Juan Archuleta, like he started off really hot against Juan Archuleta, hurt him, kind of slowed down a little bit. Archuleta was kind of getting back into the fight, and then boom, step and knee, put him down against a guy, who's at 135, and one of the, I don't know, where was he at that time? Top 20-ish guy in the world. Mm-hmm. Give or take, guys had really, a lot of success in his career, and he just ends it in a second. That's what Asakura can do. He makes some defensive flaws. He backs straight up. He's very hittable because he likes to brawl. I wouldn't call him a wrestler, but he's scrambly. Like he's wiry. He can win scrambles. He's got pretty good takedown defense. I wonder how it's going to be in a cage and much different than rising in a ring and everything. But if he gets on top, he advances position. He's got fierce ground and pound. I mean, again, there's some things that you could do in Ryzen that's different than UFC, but I mean, knees on the ground, elbows on the ground, ground and pound. I mean, the guy is serious with his. He's a violent dude, and he's never been submitted, which is a big feat. Now, has he fought someone like Pantoja? That's another thing. I think this fight's amazing. I think Asakura is a great addition to the UFC. I said it. I'm worried about his weight cut. If Pantoja can't get him down, Asakura could absolutely starch him. If you told me like Asakura knocks out Pantoja in the first round, I go like, it's not out of the realm possibility. Like that's his game. He's also very hittable, and it wouldn't be surprised like if Pantoja catches him. Oh man, I think Pantoja is going to do his thing. I think he's going to mix in some takedowns. I know Asakura is huge. I know Asakura has some solid takedown defense, but Pantoja always finds ways. I mean, Brandon Moreno was a good wrestler and good takedown defense, and he found ways to get those little spaces. I think Pantoja is going to backpack him. I think he's going to have long periods of time like that. Asakura never has been sub. I think it's finally going to happen. I think Pantoja does it. I think Pantoja subs him. I'm going to say it's later in the fight, maybe when the weight cut starts getting to Asakura. Give me Pantoja by 4th round submission.
I love the breakdown, and it's so similar to mine that like I'll try not to blab too much here. Yeah. Asakura, for as fun as he is to watch as a striker, just as explosive, as powerful, showing that kind of knockout power that's so rare to see in these lower weight classes, even now, has the defensive lapses you mentioned. And you look at the times he's gotten knocked out, and I'm thinking back to Horiguchi and Kopp both knocking him out in Ryzen, and I feel like both times it was a similar situation where he's like backing straight up without moving his head off the center line, and they just keep moving forward, and they don't catch him with the first or second punch, but they catch him with the third, it rocks him, and then things go downhill from there. So his defensive liabilities are out there, but it's only been, Kopp and Horiguchi, 2 top 5-ish guys that have been able to take advantage of it, but that's absolutely the same kind of thing Pantoja could do. Could Asakura catch Pantoja, hurt him, knock him out? Absolutely. That's one of the things that has made men's flyweight so fun in the post Demetrius Johnson era, because Johnson might be the greatest fighter of all time, but he was so invulnerable that most of his opponents never even won a minute of the fight against him. He almost never made mistakes, no defensive lapses. He was just styling on these people. And then there comes this whole crowd of fighters that have been juggling the title in the last couple of years, and they're all great, but they're all vulnerable. Like, as awesome as Brandon Moreno was, I never thought he was going to string together 4 or 5 title defenses in a row, because he's too aggressive, too wild, has too many defensive lapses, and there are too many dangerous guys. I feel the same about Pantoja. He's incredible. He might get his 3rd defense here, but I still don't think he's probably going to get 5 or 6. Just he's a vulnerable guy, but that's part of what makes him fun to watch. He's so aggressive. I realize now that I've never mentioned off the top what the odds were. Pantoja is a comfortable favorite. No surprise there. He's around minus 270. Asakura around plus 220, which, considering all the question marks there are hovering around Asakura, a full year layoff, first time making this weight in 7 years, first time fighting in the US, in the UFC case, like all the variables, all the question marks kind of fade Asakura. So I understand why the odds are what they are. But as far as the fight itself, I'm with you. I expect Pantoja to win. And honestly, Pantoja getting the first ever submission win by anybody over Asakura is what I was kind of thinking. And I was figuring it would be once Pantoja had dragged Asakura into waters that he was very familiar with. I mean, Pantoja's gone the distance in 5 rounds in his last 3 fights, where Asakura's never fought past the 3rd round. 4th round sub by Pantoja sounds exactly right for me, but I think it's going to be the kind of fight that leaves people excited to see Asakura going forward, and is going to position Asakura, like, even if Asakura loses, if he loses the way you and I are predicting, I think he gets a top 10 opponent in his next matchup anyway. Like, I don't think he falls far from the title picture at all. And assuming he's able to make the weight on a consistent basis, I think he slots in as an immediate contender. It's going to be a blast for as long as we've got this guy in the UFC, but this kind of matchup under these circumstances against the best flyweight in the world, he has the puncher's chance that he has against everybody, but I'm certainly not banking on that. I won't try to make things interesting by being different. I'm just going to say Pantoja by 4th round sub sounds good to me as well. And that is the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 310 Pantoja versus Asakura. I have been Ben. He's been Keith. If this is your first time watching or listening, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring you a blend of in-depth analysis and occasional historic or humorous asides that we don't think you'll find anywhere else in this industry. So please do like, subscribe. Neither of those things cost you anything. They make our bosses happy. They allow us to keep bringing you this content free of charge. And drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We would love to hear your take on these fights. We each picked 3 upsets, but rare for us, none of us picked the same upsets. There's usually at least one unanimous upset pick that we tell you can take to the bank in small amount, bet responsibly. This time there were none, but yeah, if you think we were missing out on any, or you think any of the upset picks we made were bananas, let us know. If you're right and we're wrong, we will give you your flowers on the recap. You just have to show up to collect them. We're live on the Sherdog YouTube page right after the main event. Keith takes the captain's chair. We'll talk about all 14 of these fights from top to bottom, reverse order of how we just did it. We'll talk about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. We'll talk about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers, and we'll talk with you. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights. The live chat is open during the whole show, so we're taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We'd love to have you join us. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy these fights.
Make your bed of fairy tales while you're